What's life's biggest trap that people fall into? The sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've spent a certain amount of time or energy or money on something, it doesn't mean you need to stick with it forever. If you're really unhappy in a relationship, don't stay in it just because you've spent the last 10 years with that person. If you're miserable at work and there's no happiness in sight, don't stay just because you'd put too much time and energy into it. I know a couple of people in debt because they have this mentality when it comes to gambling. If they lose $1,000, they'll gamble another $1,000 to try and win it back with, since they feel they've invested so much already. Of course, they lose again and feel compelled to gamble another $2,000 to break even. At some point, you've just got to count your losses and move on. Getting married to the wrong person at the wrong age out of sheer fear of staying alone. I don't know that it's the biggest trap, but definitely procrastination is a massive one. A lot of people think it's funny or joke about being procrastinators, usually along with stories of a clutch, last-minute scramble that somehow worked. I'm one of those people. Even if those stories are fun, there's a less fun side to procrastination. It's when there are no deadlines, no due dates, but you tell yourself that you'll do it tomorrow every day. That you'll learn a language, talk to your parents, get a degree, whatever. Then one day, for whatever reason, it's too late and you just feel regret. Don't procrastinate, it'll catch up with you eventually. Cultural or social pressure to get married before you're ready to be married. I have two groups of friends who married in their early 20s. One of those groups dated for 3 or 4 years after high school and realized that they'd already built the foundations of their lives together, so they got married after college. They have a home, a child, and a goofy cat. The other group dated for a year or two after high school and got pregnant by accident. Family pressure, religious pressure, and societal pressure made them cave and get married when they were about 22 or 23 years old. They divorced before the child was born, they absolutely hate each other, and blame each other for ruining the other's life, and their child is stuck in the middle of it. The narrator lost touch with almost all of his high school friends over the years, but yeah, a couple did get hitched. There's a lot of Schrodinger's marriages to check back into sometime to see which of those groups they fit into. Sales. Just because something is on sale, it doesn't mean you're saving money, especially if you wouldn't have bought it otherwise. Think of it not as saving 50%, but spending 50%, for example. I don't know if this counts as a trap, but having the mindset ingrained into you, starting from childhood, that you have to be friends with everyone you meet. I try to be friends with everyone, but after a while of getting to know them, I decide they're not really the kind of people I want as a friend. Thinking that you have to achieve everything. People think that they have to be motivated to do something. They get a burst of motivation to start something, and then they never finish it. Thousands of hours or dollars flushed into something waiting on their inspiration that'll never get finished. If I recall correctly, Stephen King forces himself to write 4 to 6 hours a day. That always inspired me to tread through the hard parts. Anyone can start something. Lifestyle inflation. A friend of mine just lost his job due to corporate resizing. He worked at the same company for 8 years and built up a very hefty variable monthly income from sales commission while his base pay barely increased. His lifestyle got inflated over the 8 years, living in a nice condo, driving a Volvo SUV, they're expensive here in Asia, 2 kids, and told his wife to leave her job to focus on the kids. Now he's out of a job with more loans than he can manage and with career capital that's been stagnant for the past 8 years. Oh, the biggest trap? It's Reddit, hands down. Failing to move beyond your past. I've seen this everywhere I go, and certainly in my extended family over the years. Basically, depending on who you are, but for many of us, life punches you in the mouth. Past issues and injustice like the shortcomings of one's parents, growing up poor, failed marriages, or even feeling like you failed your own children are examples of what can keep people completely stuck in their tracks if they can't let go of the pain. Many uncles and aunts who are substance addicts, poor, alone, among other things, all share the one thing: the inability to reconcile problems from their past, stemming mostly from fractured relationships with their parents and severe poverty sometimes. My cousins who have the same issues, 2 out of 3 were born with learning disabilities and never moved beyond the feeling that they were dumb and didn't belong in a classroom. Neither of them graduated high school. Many of us have been hurt, born into bad situations, whatever. One characteristic that makes some people more successful than others in this situation is the ability to let go of their pain. If you won't do it, you can't find the inspiration and drive you'll need to achieve personal success. Caring what some jerk thinks about you. I feel like people rush into marriages and kids because society tells you that that's the natural course your life must take, and then people end up with a mortgage and kids and feel miserable. I pretty much decided that I'm 27, I don't want kids, and if I get married at some point, great. But it really removed a lot of stress from my life. I can focus on things I actually want to do now. When I was pregnant, I'd have women constantly say how they haven't gotten there yet, and they'd act like their life was some kind of failure. I'd tell them that not everyone is on the same path or timeline. The woman I recall talking to was traveling the world. I thought that was a great way to spend a life. Not everyone has to settle down by getting married or finding a permanent residence and raising kids. Staying in their comfort zone rather than extending themselves to try new things and grow as a person. They stop trying as soon as something gets hard. The idea that you need all this crap to be happy. Consumerism can be killer. In my opinion, there's no real plan for anyone. I'm not talking about religion, but the pressure people put on themselves is incredible. I've got to graduate college by this year. I've got to have a house at this age. Life is full of so many different people, stories, places, and things. Take the pressure off of yourself and enjoy it. College. It's not really for everyone, and if it's not, then why go into so much debt? The whole situation largely happened because people saw that if you've got a degree, you were pretty much guaranteed a good job. But they failed to understand why that was true at the time and instead came to the naive conclusion that if everyone got a degree, then everyone would have a better job. But college degrees back then netted better jobs in part because they were relatively rare and in part because the better jobs that were available really did benefit from or need more education from those that filled them, which meant an ever-increasing number of people going to college without a clear career desire to fit a degree to, which destroyed both of those things. There are also problems with inflated requirements and a loss of respect for people in low education jobs that are still an honest day's work. To be honest, it's wild how many of us found this out after our multi-$1,000 5-year investments. Oh well, at least most of us partied it right up and had some good memories. Looking for short-term solutions instead of committing to long-term investments. Any sort of investment in yourself, whether it's career, health, education, salary appreciations, etc., takes years of hard work. So many people go from short-term solution to short-term solution for years, never making any progress. From one crash diet to another, from one get-rich scheme to the next, then they get old, they've accomplished nothing, become bitter and blame everyone else. If you're willing to put in hard work and be consistent about it, you'll have well-paying jobs, you'll fix whatever issues you have, and be in good health. Taking life too seriously. You have to surrender to it after a while. The happiest people I've come across are so open and vocal about their vulnerabilities and problems. The most unhappy ones are constantly competitive. They think admitting weakness is a failure. They think contentment is a lack of ambition or a laid-back attitude. Just be brave and soldier on. Thinking that potential is in any way important. You don't get points for half-finished projects, and ideas are cheap. Things you have the potential to do are meaningless unless and until you actually do them, and until you actually do them, you don't get to brag. The guy sitting in Starbucks on his MacBook, writing the same 10 opening pages of his novel over and over again without ever making it to page 11 is kidding himself. Don't be that guy. Actually finish things, then either move on to the next project or try and edit the last one to make it better. Complacency when it comes to money. You work hard for your wages, but how hard do they work for you? If it all goes to minimum payments and gas, you're never going to get anywhere. It can really suck to make it happen, but getting out of debt and actually building a savings account is such a good feeling. People make fun of my old car and my small apartment in one breath, and in the next, they're freaking out about what'll happen if they lose their job tomorrow. Meanwhile, my husband and I can put away enough for the future and fun things, help support our extended family, donate to charity, and still have enough to go out to a movie and dinner every week. We still don't have a ton in savings, but I make enough at my $2 above minimum wage job to support us if my husband loses his, on top of the 6 months' wages we have in savings. It's all because we ignored common sense advice about money. Agreed. I drive an old and kinda crappy car and I have a small one-bedroom, kinda far from things. My coworkers have nicer apartments and better cars, but then they insist I must be rich when I take long weekends in Reykjavik. Automated bill paying is really convenient, but it definitely robs a lot of people of understanding exactly how much they blow on things that they don't need. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I think the biggest trap is when the money you're earning is just enough to live semi-comfortably, but the time it takes to earn it is also stopping you from improving yourself. Around here, 2 incomes at $14 an hour, 40-hour weeks, is enough to live rather comfortably in a middle-class area, but never enough to do anything fun or really have a family. It's a trap because I can earn less or quit entirely. At least then I'll be able to get a skill set or education that pays better. However, at the time it would be quite painful overall, so people get trapped by refusing the pain and never making the gains. Spending money that you don't have to buy things that you don't need to impress people that you don't like. The script? Go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, retire, die. Aside from that final step, all the other ones are optional. Do what you want. You don't need to go to college to have a good career, you don't owe it to society to get married, you don't owe it to your family to have kids, and you don't owe it to yourself to retire. It's your life, live it how you want. Thinking that moon-sized battle stations are non-operational. The stuff that makes you feel the best, substances, booze, and food that's bad for you, will kill you prematurely. Consumerism. Allowing themselves to be manipulated by advertising and marketing into thinking that they're just one product short of happiness. Facebook. It's nothing short but advertisements, videos with advertisements, news from untrustworthy sources, crappy conspiracy theories people come up with while on the crapper, but every once in a while you'll see someone's cute cat or dog. I've been Facebook and Instagram free for a month and I don't plan on ever going back. It feels like I have my life back again. Why does it seem like there are only people who obsessively use Facebook all the time for that stupid crap, or people who've sworn off it and won't touch it? I rarely bother with my newsfeed, but it's a nice way to chat to friends and organize events. There's a middle ground where it's a really useful tool. I've got no idea why so many people struggle to find it. Overextending yourself on a mortgage. Real estate is such a volatile market, and before you know it, you owe more than your house is worth. The American dream can quickly turn into the American nightmare. 1. Debt. The worst thing you can get into in your 20s. If you instead save and invest, you'll avoid major troubles in your life. And 2. Spending time fighting and arguing with nasty people. Just let it go. It's not worth it. The narrator has been much happier with his life since he just stopped dealing with people who clearly just want to have an argument. Devil's advocates and party debaters are just so fricking annoying. Thinking, I have plenty of time left. In the worst case, you die tomorrow, no matter how old you are. It can be a car crash at 16, bursting aneurysm at 30, or getting shot at 55. Or the second equally scary alternative, you grow old and are then too old to do the stuff you told yourself you would do one day. Travel the world when you retire, catch a common illness like heart disease, and nope, there's 1,000 things you suddenly can't do. Oh come on, this is a bit extreme. Actually, the worst case scenario is that you die right now. I know so many people who just get locked into work, go home, eat, sleep, repeat, day in, day out. Their weekends or days off, they're busying themselves doing housework, shopping, and then it's back to work again. They become more and more miserable, but somehow they just can't see it. I try to tell people, you need to do something random at least once a week, something out of your routine. You'd be amazed at how little it inconveniences you. I myself find that routine creep happens from time to time, that you think, this has to be done though. I really have to sometimes will myself to just go, you know what, I'm just going to go to the movies. It takes a few hours out of your day at most, and it rejuvenates you, even if it's a crap movie. Homeowners associations. They're usually not worth the money you're forced to sink into them every year. I don't know about other parts of the country, but where I live, if you don't pay your HOA dues, even if you're current on your mortgage, the HOA can seize your house and kick you out. Living everywhere but the present. Focusing on your own looks and other people's looks as the most important characteristics of a person. Way too much effort is spent on makeup, hair, and dressing just the right way, and then taking and posting selfies. I mean, presentation is everything to people you don't know. If you look well-groomed and wear good clothing, you come across as someone who gives a crap about themselves compared to the guy in shorts and flip-flops. This makes many interactions in life easier. People who don't know you take your word more seriously. That's just my 2 cents, though. You don't have to spend boatloads of bucks to look good, but looking good is worth investing into. The most amazing one to me is when people get stuck in their hometown. Working a 9-to-5 that they hate to pay for stuff that they really don't need. Letting normal dictate how you live. Don't want a desk job? Great! Do something you love and you're good at. You don't want to get married? Alright then don't. A piece of paper means nothing if you're not being honest and happy. Don't want to go to college? Then don't. Get out there and work. See point A. Experience life and put your time towards something you're proud of. The older we get, the faster time flies, so spend it wisely. Never stop doing things that light your eyes up. Starting college right after high school, especially when the young adults don't know what they want to do. I'm not talking about stellar individuals with a goal in mind. Many young adults need to get out and see what they want to do. I know far too many of them jumping from major to major and never finishing college. They end up with debt instead of a career. Assuming everything will work out for the best. This is a guy's advice for a guy. Maybe it works for women too, but it wouldn't surprise me if it didn't. Thinking you have to live the dream your parents, society, or anyone else has planned for you. It's not their life, it's yours, and what you do should only be about what you desire or want. Waiting for someone or your dreams to happen. You must make your dreams happen. No one else will do it because no one else cares as much as you do. Nobody will ever tap you on the shoulder and say, "It's your time, it's your turn now." Never. Make it happy if you really want it. Thinking you have to prove something to someone else. It might be an old girlfriend or boyfriend who dumped you, but you still hold a flame for. It might be that best friend who put you down when you least expected or needed it. If you only achieve X, then they'll think of you differently, is what you're thinking. The fact is, they don't actually care, nor do they remember that you didn't measure up as you imagine that they think they do. Thinking that people are judging you. Mostly, people don't judge you unless they've explicitly told you they're doing so. Mostly, people don't care about you and they're actually ignoring you, not actively shunning you. You are an object to them. Thinking that other people's opinions of you really mean you are what they say you are. Okay, if a friend says, "You really need to know this because you're hurting yourself," then take their opinion under advisement. But in other cases, the best thing is not to give them the satisfaction to confirm their opinions. Who says they have any legitimacy? This is especially if it hurts you deeply. Don't invest more emotional energy into a situation than it really deserves. That applies to new relationships. Take it slow. That applies to road rages while driving. Take a deep breath. And that applies to bullies. Laugh them off, roll your eyes, or ignore them. You might see a pattern to what I'm saying. Never mistake for malice what is actually pure indifference. And don't forget indifference can work for you as well. Believing anything anybody says on the internet, especially when all of the comments are written by 20-something-year-olds who think they have life all figured out, giving bad advice. Substances. Crappy communities make it seem like the only option, but it's not. That you have to have a big wedding ceremony with a giant dress, tons of expensive food, flowers, photographer, catering. All of that is nice and all, but maybe I'd like to get married to the person I love without putting myself in $50,000 of debt. Yeah, a house deposit for a big party does seem a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? No matter how much you love the person, I still think eloping is the best option. Thinking that you can't rebuild your life from your mistakes. Almost 4 years ago, I got a DUI and evicted from my apartment shortly after. I had no direction and was a single parent of a damn great kid. I didn't think that I'd be able to fix this. I decided to get my act together bit by bit, budgeted my money and paid down my debts. Went to school through a university online while working 2 jobs. After my license was given back, I learned not to use the booze to numb my feelings and to never drive inebriated. Ever. I now have a wonderful job in my field where I'm licensed and a second one for extra money. Just leased a new car. Bills are paid, credit went up, damn great kid is still great. Family's respect is renewed, and I have an amazing significant other who watched me rebuild and supported me, and I know that he's the one. I promise you can build back from your rock bottom. Don't get stuck in that thought trap. Personifying things like society, the economy, identity groups, it's a useful mental shortcut for getting a quick and very basic grasp of complicated things, but it leads to really stupid conclusions when people forget that the map is not the territory. It causes people to imply intentionality where there is none. It assumes an ability to coordinate mass action in unrealistic ways. It also causes people to assume groups are much more monolithic than they actually are. Not exercising or eating right. Easy to fall into, and it happens. Just don't do it for too long, like years. I stopped running and eating right 9 months ago, ruined my body, and now I'm chubby and gross. The biggest trap is not working on your brain. People live their whole lives saying to themselves, nothing's going to change, this is who I am. Mostly they do it out of laziness because changing for the better takes work. What was it actually like to be on reality TV? How real or fake was it? Several years ago, my cousin went in for a tattoo at the shop from Inked. You know, the one in Vegas. It was an off-filming day, so none of the artists from the show were in. He got his tattoo started, and they asked him to come back in a few weeks when it was healed up to schedule an appointment to finish it. When he showed up, filming for the season was finished. The shop was closed, cleaned out, and the space was for sale. You know, that seems somewhat fraudulent. My dad sued my mum, and they both ended up on Judge Joe Brown because Judge Judy said no. My dad is a scumbag. He dodged child support payments for close to 8 years and didn't contact me or my sister during that time, from when I was 5 to 13. When I was 13, he popped back up out of the blue and wanted to visit, but he lived in the Ozarks now and we live in New England. So he flies out for a couple of days and we visit, don't really hit it off, and he goes back home. A few months later, we get a letter from some producers in LA saying my dad called the number for Judge Judy and filed a lawsuit against my mum, demanding she reimburse him for the money he spent to visit us. It says Judge Judy turned it down, but they had a new show yet to air called Judge Joe Brown. They wanted my parents to appear on that. If she said no, there was no legal jeopardy for her. The show is for entertainment. It also said my mum could file a countersuit against my dad. So being really angry, she did, for everything from school tuition, to books, to dentist bills, to my sister's speech therapy, food, school supplies, clothes, and fricking everything for 8 years. It came out to about $150K. Now, the filming date is scheduled and it happens to fall on my first day of school. My mum decides that's too important a day to miss, so I'm cut from the trip. They fly out, get put up for free in a nice hotel, free meals, spend a while in hair and makeup, then start filming. Within 3 minutes, the judge boots my sister from the room, saying that a little girl doesn't need to see her parents fight in public. Good guy. The judge listens to both my dad and my mum. My dad's reason for suing was that my mum lived too far away. The judge asks who decided to move to the Ozarks. The judge calls my dad a moron. Judge listens to my mum list off all of the crap my dad skated on. Judge says if he could, he'd give her every dime she asked for, but the limit is $5K and she's getting all of that. The judge tells my dad he should be ashamed. My mum calls my dad a deadbeat on national television, crossing that off her bucket list. Both she and my sister got a bonus $300 appearance fee and cards from a bunch of people who book extras and backgrounds for soap operas and stuff. Then they spent the next day at Universal Studios, the same day as the MTV Movie Awards, so they all got to watch all the limos arrive and some of the red carpet for that. Then on the flight back, they ran into some soap opera actors from General Hospital, which is my mum's favorite. It was a good trip for her. Ha! You know, I always felt like the people on these law shows were just roundly being exploited, but I'm happy to be proven wrong in this one case. Screw you, author's dad. I was on set for a filming of Ghost Hunters in Buffalo. On the show, they're investigating an upper level of the Buffalo Central Terminal when they hear a disembodied voice say, "Get out!" It was the property manager on a lower level yelling at some homeless people to clear out. Everyone knew it was him, but it somehow made it into the show as an unexplained event. When my wife and I were looking to buy a home in Michigan, our agent told us we had the opportunity to be on House Hunters if we wanted to. We talked to some person from the show and they told us the basic process. We'd buy whatever home we wanted, then they'd film us there before we moved in, as though we were just looking at the place, as well as 2 other prospective places that they'd selected. Then we'd ultimately choose the house we'd already bought and live happily ever after. We watched a few episodes, or I did, my wife already liked the show, and I convinced my wife of how stupid they'd probably make us look, so we passed on that. While at a bar in New York City, someone approached my dad and his buddy asking if they wanted to be on a gourmet cooking show. Naturally, they agreed and asked if I, a 14-year-old at the time, could join. The promoter said, of course, gave them the location and told them to tell me not to eat a big lunch, as it would be a large multi-course meal at an upscale restaurant. I skipped lunch that day after a rough lunchtime soccer match and left school early to meet my father and his friend. We arrived in a strange part of Manhattan, near the Hudson, in a rather dead part of the city. We got a call from the producer saying, "Sorry man, wrong location. We're sending a car to pick you up immediately." We hopped into a taxi and boom, you're on cash cab, the bald-headed host declared as lights flashed above our heads. So, we lost, got kicked out in Chelsea, and ended up spending our own money on food and a taxi home. It was very upsetting. I was on This Morning when I was about 7, and they did a big makeover for me and my siblings. The premise they created was that we were a nightmare and my poor mum just wanted us to look smart for an upcoming christening. The main part I remember was them telling us to jump in the mud and shout no when our mum asked us to stop. Normally, we wouldn't have dared, so I remember that being fun. Oh, and my sister ruined her hair 3 times before going on stage, so they made us hold her hand so she couldn't touch it. I have several friends that were on the first season of Moonshiner on the Discovery Channel. It's totally fake. I mean, they do make moonshine, but what you see on the show is not what it's like in real life. Most of them are licensed to sell alcohol, and do sell it locally at the package stores. The others only make a little to have for themselves and a few friends, more to keep up a family tradition than anything else. But the producers had them set up stills in the woods and even told them what to wear to make it look more like a backwoods, redneck, good old boys thing than anyone in this area has looked in 50 years. Most of us sat there with the guys that were being filmed, watching the episodes and laughing at all the people that probably think this stuff is real, while drinking store-bought beer. The hard stuff is only for rare occasions. It'll rot your gut if you drink it all the time. I worked on Love It or List It. The reactions at the time of the reveal of the house were meant to be real, and they actually signed a contract saying they won't go in the house before renovations are complete. 99% of the work isn't done by the people shown doing the work on TV. It's done by subcontractors. The entire staff works until 1 or 2 a.m. the night before filming to get the house ready. Most of the stuff they put in for design purposes was taken back after the shoot because it wasn't part of the homeowner's budget. We got blacklisted from several stores because we'd buy thousands of dollars of stuff and take it back after we shot. I was on Jerry Springer. The episode never aired, but the entire thing was fake. They even asked me to find friends to complete the storyline of a double love triangle. Coolest part of all of that was when they literally asked me if I wanted a fake doctor's note or a fake death certificate made out in a fake family member's name in order to get me out of work. They literally had a guy on staff whose only job was to get people out of work so they could attend filming. My ex was scheduled to appear on Jerry Springer once. His girlfriend at the time was an exotic dancer, and their show recruiters went to the club she was dancing at to pick up girls for upcoming episodes. She agreed to film and managed to get a deal where my ex would get to appear on the show with her. Behind-the-scenes negotiations involved coming up with a storyline and light scripting. The plot would be that he was appearing on the show to propose to his stripper girlfriend, and she would reveal that she was actually a working girl and would introduce him to her pimp. The showrunners loved it and even agreed to provide an engagement ring for the bit. So he woke up for his morning flight, turned on the TV while he packed, and watched the Twin Towers fall on live TV. September 11th blocked his chance at white trash fame. Well, that was a wild roller coaster of a story. Of course, we all knew that Jerry Springer was more fiction than any given anime, but the story leading up to this guy's cancelled TV appearance is just stranger than any story the writers could have come up with themselves. When I was in university about 7 years ago, we got an email inviting us to take part in 60-Minute Makeover in the UK. It's a show where a person's family calls in a team of experts to totally refurnish their house while they're away from home for the day. The audience at home are led to believe that all of the work is done within 60 minutes, and they make a point to start their countdown on camera and rush everyone in to meet the deadline. About 10 of us joined the makeover team at about 8 a.m. on the day, and were given flat-pack furniture to make outside the house before they started the makeover. The crew had a skip outside where they threw all of this poor, unsuspecting guy's furniture, only to be replaced with all of this cheap stuff that was only available to him via sponsorship of the program. They list all of the new furniture's manufacturers in the credits at the end of the show. They also masked off all of the skirting boards and light switches, ready for painting before we were let loose inside. We were let into the house as a member of the ITV crew declared the start of our 60 minutes. After 30 minutes of frantic, patchy wall painting, carrying lamps, uncomfortable seating and chipboard coffee tables into the house, we were told to vacate. We then had lunch in the street while the experts went in to clean up our mess and then did it all again for another strict 30 minutes. After we were finished and the official 60 minutes were over, there was another period of professionals tidying and filling our crappy decorating before we all gathered outside and waited for a man to come home from work. He'd find that all of his furniture had been smashed into a skip outside the house and replaced with stuff that may look good on camera for a couple of seconds during a quick sequence, but would be very disappointing to live with. This man would be very happy about his makeover, and we'd leave the scene as more experienced, well-rounded students with an insight into TV production. My cousin was involved in filming for The Bachelor, not as a contestant, and said that they film many scenes in several different ways. For example, they might film them cuddling while walking, and then walking while looking annoyed, and so on. Not that fake, but yeah. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In Holland, there was a Dutch version of Pimp My Ride. A player of a football team we played against had his car pimped, and the car didn't even make it home. He had to call the car repair service on his way back from the studio. My mate was on tattoo fixers. If you don't know what it is, basically they get people with tattoos they regret and make a design they don't tell them about, tattoo it on top and cover up the old one, and surprise them at the end. He filmed the big surprise reveal like 5 times because he wasn't surprised enough. Not me, but my best friend was 16 and pregnant. Now, I don't know if this is always the case, but none of the drama on her episode was fabricated. However, at one point, they did ask her to reenact a conversation that she had with her mother off camera. The funny part is they had her reenact it about a week after giving birth, so she was no longer pregnant. To hide that, she wore a big sweatshirt and held a teddy bear in front of her tummy, so you couldn't tell the difference. My sister's friend's family was on House Hunters several years ago, and everything about it was staged. They'd already decided on the house before the show even started filming, and another 2 options that the couple was considering were found afterwards. They filmed a bunch of fake conversations between the family members to make it seem like they were still making up their mind. The thing is, this was a Latino family and every member struggled heavily with English. The conversation scenes were obviously forced as these people were just stumbling their way through scripted English sequences, and it was obvious that they would have been having conversations in Spanish if they were on their own. The issue was so bad that I'm surprised they even aired the episode. I was on an episode of Wife Swap. One of the wives was a burlesque dancer, so her new husband had to MC a variety show of which she was the headliner. I was the juggler in that act. Full disclosure, I'm pretty sure all tape with me on it is on the cutting room floor. Anyway, it's pretty darn fake. The people are real and a lot of their interactions are real, but a lot of scenarios are staged. Okay, now we're going to plan for the show, but make sure Wally, the new husband, takes over. He had never done anything showbiz before, so naturally we tried to help him, but the director kept telling us that he was in charge and he needed to be doing the planning. I caught a moment of a personal interview as well. Honest answers, but very much being steered by the camera crew and director. During the show, the crew said they needed to get sound levels, so they had people sit quietly, clap politely, clap normally, clap loudly, among others. I'm fairly certain that this was so that they could have clips showing a range of responses. In the end, the whole show bit got about 4 seconds of screen time. Waste of 2 days, no pay for us. What the actual fudge? I mean, I knew that these shows were complete bullcrap, but you'd have thought that they'd actually pay the people who they're literally rounding in to do what sounds like legitimate acting, as in doing stuff as commanded by the director that isn't real. So dumb. I was on a European version of Survivor, where we went to an island and had to survive for 2 weeks. Whatever was seen on camera was what was actually happening. The only fake thing is that we got some food to maintain a somewhat healthy diet. My girlfriend's best mate was on a similar show here in Australia. She said there was a lot of clever editing, obviously, but that the crew fed them plenty of booze and a little bit of food. I actually have 3. A friend of mine was on The Bachelor. This was years ago, and she ended up being one of the last 4 girls. She said they were constantly fed alcohol, were put on a strict sleep schedule where they were literally put to bed and woken up. Also, there were no clocks anywhere, so all the girls were in a constant state of alcohol-fueled disorientation. There were no chance encounters where the guy is just sitting on a couch and the girl goes up to talk to him. All of that is staged. Even their conversations were reshot over and over if the reactions weren't right or if their wording was off. The entire thing was completely controlled, and she said no one really knew the guy because none of their interactions were real. Another friend of mine's house was on House Hunters. He wasn't on the show himself, but his house was the one that was picked. And yes, it was sold and all the paperwork was signed before they filmed. He was there when they filmed all the segments, but wasn't allowed on camera. And my wife was on America's Got Talent. She was a dancer for her friend's act. She said they lived in a tent for 4 days in the parking lot. She had a very positive experience, though. She said she met a lot of cool people and that it did feel genuine for the one episode she was on. Her friend made it through that round but got eliminated the following week. I was on an Australian reality show called Surprise Chef. The premise of the show was that the celebrity chef would meet someone at the supermarket and then cook dinner for them. On my episode, I volunteered at an aquarium. The story in this episode was that the chef met my boss at the supermarket, then cooked all of the aquarium volunteers a nice surprise dinner. Of course, this was all pre-arranged. There was no meeting by chance. We all knew what was happening, so for the scene, we all got surprised in the shark tank. We knew what was happening and did 7 takes of fake surprise. The celebrity chef cooked nothing. He went in for a few takes and an actual chef cooked all of the food, while the celebrity stood outside chain smoking. The food was average, basically local RSL quality, chicken parm and profiteroles. I think I drew the short straw of things you get in a reality show, a crappy meal. Other people get like cars or renovation makeovers. My brother was on X Factor UK. There are several rounds before the televised rounds, so all of those rubbish acts you see on TV have been picked by producers to go through. I've also been in the audience of The Voice and X Factor, and they make you do loads of fake cheering, dancing, and clapping before the show starts, so they can cut it into the actual show. 90% of the cheering you see or hear on televised shows has been added in post-production. My dad was on Comic Book Men, basically the same as pawn shop stars, but for comics set in New Jersey. He didn't want to sell the item, he just wanted to show it off. It was off-the-cuff dialogue with cast live on camera. He did 2 takes, there was no script. They did ask him to come up with a reason to sell the item, which was based on truth. I was on set with him as the background. It was pretty cool to be there, but I had to stay in the same place for an hour and a half rereading the same crappy DC comic. They aren't allowed to show any Marvel stuff unless it's an item someone brings into a store. The crew spends about 15 minutes hiding all of the Marvel items in the store before shooting a segment. I loved the experience though. I was on Stan Lee's Superhumans. Long shoot at the high-altitude chamber I worked at. They brought a guy who had climbed Mount Everest a bunch of times without supplemental oxygen, 29,000 feet, so we brought him to the same altitude in the chamber with some Westerners to compare against. He asked for oxygen after 15 minutes, and after 30, they asked me to pretend to pass out. Looking back at what aired, it's obvious that I was faking, and they edited the show so that he won the competition. It's Season 2 and Spider-Man is the episode title. I worked with this guy who was on a TV show in England. He said the show producers would tell him he'd get more airtime if he was cheating on his partner instead of just being happy with his girlfriend. They just love the drama and don't care what it costs. Yep, that about checks out. At least it sounded like Jerry Springer had the decency to plan the affairs and fake it with the people on the show, so that he wasn't just encouraging people to ruin their real-life relationships as well as their reputations. I was on a TV show in the UK called Bargain Hunt. I went on it for a bit of a drunken dare and never expected to get past the online application form. But after a phone interview and a bargain hunt tryout day, we got on, as in me and my workmate. I asked my workmate as he was going through a crappy time. It was shot over 2 days. On day 1, we had 1 hour to choose the 3 antiques to buy, and day 2 was the auction day, where we sell chosen items. The only fake bit about it was that we had an hour to choose our 3 items, but we actually spread this over 5 hours as we had to film, get sound right, get lighting right, among other things. And as the TV crew was sorting out lighting and stuff, me and my friend would keep on looking around the antique house for other objects to buy. A guy didn't ask me anything about being on Pimp My Ride. Everything done to the car was cosmetic. I believe his car didn't run before the show and didn't run after. Basically, a polished turd. I was on a reality ambulance TV show when I was an EMT. The patients were real and their medical conditions were real. Everything else about the show was fake. When we filmed it was for a bariatric ambulance TV show. In the morning, when the camera crew got there, they filmed us driving lights and sirens around the parking lot. Then we did personal interviews where they let us talk about moving bariatric patients and how we felt about our jobs. Then they made us say a bunch of stuff that we normally would never say, like, "Without us, these patients would die," among others. They used these clips of the stuff they made us say and spliced it into the real-life stuff we said. Our actual ambulance transport scene in the show was 100% planned and scripted. The patient wanted to go to the ER and have some decubitus ulcers looked at. However, this patient, being diabetic, had a high blood sugar of 400, having just eaten and taken insulin. We took that and were forced to treat it like a life-or-death situation, and then they used our earlier footage of saying things were life and death and our driving around the parking lot lights and sirens to make it seem like we were fighting for her life. In reality, in about 30 minutes her sugar was going to go back down to normal and life would be good. The whole experience actually turned me off reality TV and made me realize how fake everything is. I had a cousin on the new Chris Hansen. I wish that was fake. It's not. My cousin was on Hell's Kitchen and said they'd film for over 10 hours a day, then they'd go to sleep around 11 p.m. only to get woken up at 2 a.m. to film again to make them more irritable. The producers would purposely bring up topics to create drama with the chefs. They retaped when they answered the door in the beginning a couple of times to make them seem more surprised. They portrayed my cousin as the classic hot blonde. It was certainly more of a reality TV show than a cooking show. What's the dumbest reason the cops got called to a scene? The reporting party said a pigeon was acting strangely on her deck. It wouldn't fly away. It flew away when I clapped my hands. Also had a call for 2 people riding bikes smiling suspiciously. A lady called because a cat was in her yard, not attacking anyone or anything like that. It was just in her yard. Even better is that we had to do a report every time we responded to a call, even if no citations were issued. So in my report, I put a cat as the suspect and a calico as its race. I belong to an online neighborhood board. Some woman went off because people walk their dogs and the dogs go number 2 on her lawn. We had all agreed that not cleaning up after your dog is terrible. She clarified and said that, everyone was picking up the number 2, but it was leaving germs on her lawn, so she called the police. Responded to the outside of the county jail one time, the LA County Twin Towers, and had to actually fight a guy trying to climb the fence into the jail. This might not sound like much until you realize that we had to fight a guy in order to prevent him from entering the jail, then drove around the back and put him in jail. LA is fricking weird. I was dispatched to a house in reference to a reported vandalism to a vehicle. When I got there, the guy who called was standing by his car. I saw that there was no visible damage to the vehicle. His complaint was that dust picked up by the wind was coming from his neighbor's yard and landing on his car. The guy actually wanted to file a criminal complaint. My first thought was that maybe I was dreaming this nonsense. All I could do in response was stare at him and say absolutely nothing. The guy became uncomfortable and explained his complaint again. I couldn't help but just stare at him more. At the time, I didn't think I could say anything to him that didn't sound insulting. I think he finally got it since he just went inside his house and never called us again. Well, there we go. So far, the majority of the reasons can be summarized with, the person calling the police was bored and/or lonely. It's sad, but somewhat expected. Let's see if the next story follows that trend. Hint, it does. A few years ago, when I was moving into a house, I was doing most of my moving late at night. The nosy old couple across the street kept calling the cops and reporting suspicious activity. The first time the cops showed up, they were prepared for a criminal. They had their hands on their weapons, flashlights in my eyes, but by the 4th time they just BS'd with me and my family and told the couple to stop calling the cops. I'm not sure what made the couple think burglars would bring stuff into the house instead of taking it out. Once responded to a call originating in the sheriff's department parking lot. Literally walked out of the doors into the following fustercluck. A lady had just been released from the jail and her ex-girlfriend came to pick her up, drunk on a moped. The reason it got reported is that the drunk woman was doing donuts in our parking lot waiting for her ex, lost control and rammed a police car. My training sergeant had always had a saying that ran true to that day. We don't catch the smart ones. Officer here, working 2 years in a large city. The first call that truly made me question my job choice was a disturbance between a husband and wife. Officers had been out of the house earlier in the day and the wife called 911 a second time. The wife called and said she and her husband were arguing because she wanted to do the deed but he refused because her hoo-ha stunk. It was difficult to remain professional. I was an EMT. I was called to a sick person which turned out to be a perfectly fine person that just wanted a medical checkup. And because he thought that all EMTs were doctors, we could just give him one for free since we were already there. Cop here. We have a guy in town who's a paraplegic and confined to a wheelchair. He also has a totally abrasive personality and is an all-round awful person. The county pays for a caretaker, but he either fires them or they quit because they won't cater to his unreasonable demands. He called 911 once because his trash cans didn't get moved to the curb before trash day and he wanted the cops to come do it for him. The dispatcher routed me the call. I called into dispatch and told them that I was absolutely not going out to put this guy's trash out. They ended up sending the fire department after enough cops mutinied and refused to go. Working front desk at a hotel. Customer called 911 on me because I wouldn't give him a free upgrade. My neighbor hated my Mustang. He started calling the cops on me for drag racing. No, I'm accelerating to the speed limit of 45 from a stop sign. Anyway, he started calling the cops on me when it was a pickup truck, the UPS truck, the garbage man coming by. If he heard an engine, it had to be me. I spent a couple of weeks in Germany. One night, my parents got a knock on the door. It was the cops. They had reports of me drag racing again. My parents handed the officers my keys and said, "He's been out of the country for 2 weeks. You can go feel the engine if you want." The police apologized for disrupting my parents' evening. At the apartment tower I worked security for, some Saudi royal family members called the cops because the working girl they hired took their money and ran. The cops said, "Sure, you can have the money back, but you have to admit to misdemeanor solicitation to do so." And before people ask, their cars had KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, license plates, and the Saudi royal family crest on it. Also, they admitted to what they did to the cops, so in order for the cops to take the theft report, they'd have to include the solicitation report. I'd say the cops gave them a break by just letting them all go. Soon-to-be police officer here. When I was doing an internship with the local sheriff's office, I was with one deputy and we got called out on a domestic disturbance. Before we could get there, a city police officer intercepted the call and took it, since it was just outside city limits and we were still 15 minutes away. So we continued to patrol the county when the same people called again, specifically asking for a deputy to come out to the scene. We got there, and right off the bat this woman was going on about how the city police officer was very rude to her and she wanted us to go arrest him and have him fired for unpoliceman-like conduct. That's her exact wording, by the way. I had to turn away to keep from laughing in this woman's face. She was very angry because he allegedly said the F word in front of her daughter. Keep in mind, this woman was using that word 3 or 4 times in each sentence. We pretty much told her that our department doesn't police other departments and that she should contact the chief of police and make a formal complaint. This didn't sit well with her, and she told us that we needed to leave before she called the cops on us. Again, I'm not joking. At this point, the guy I was with couldn't take it anymore and told the woman that he was arresting himself and taking himself downtown, and we left trying not to bust out laughing. If everything goes right, I'll have some more stories once I get hired by the sheriff's office. My grandma was recovering from surgery in the hospital once. She had to share the room with this senile woman. I was really young, but this woman was so memorable. Whenever she needed something, like being hungry, bed raised, whatever, she'd dial out to 911, like multiple times in an hour, because you can call 911 for help, you see? I guess eventually dispatch called the hospital and told the nurses station what was happening, and they had to go in there and talk to her about it. Hilarious, though. Well, it's just nice to have one that was based on a misunderstanding rather than the people being inherently crappy or just desperate for attention. I hope they got the old dear to understand. Oh, so many. A woman found a half-eaten sandwich in her unfenced backyard. She thinks someone threw it in there to poison her dog. She saved the sandwich and wanted us to test it for poison. A man called because his trampoline was blowing away in a windstorm. One woman called because someone stole her American flag from her front yard. One of those little tiny yard flags that are about a foot tall and you plant in your grass. She called the morning after a particularly bad and windy thunderstorm. I had to explain to her that it's much more likely that the flag blew away than someone maliciously stole a 50-cent flag. I then found it in a nearby sewer drain. Also, my dog is acting strange. Can you send a police officer? Happens way more than you'd like to think. My favorite, though, is people who call in because people are driving too fast through the neighborhoods. So we go out there and run radar. 9 times out of 10, the person caught speeding is the one who called in the complaint to begin with. I have a family friend that works 911 dispatch, and her favorite call was when a guy called in because he got his sack caught in his zipper jeans. He thought he was going to die and kept crying on the line. I live in a neighborhood, I drive a black car, and it looks sporty. So I routinely have mums with strollers trying to tell me to slow down. And I'm always going 15 miles an hour under the speed limit. They got to where they'd be waiting for me to come home to just yell at me. They called the cops. The cops sat in the woods for apparently 2 weeks getting my speeds. I didn't know. I couldn't see them. Well, clocked me under every day going to work and back. They ended up telling the women to leave me alone or they'd arrest them for harassment without me even asking them to do anything. My dad was a dispatcher 30 years ago. Hi, I'm not sure if this is an emergency, but I think my wife is dead. A friend of mine who's a police dispatcher said a woman called the police because her teenager took the rest of the Doritos from the cupboard and wouldn't put them back. So this semester, in class, a student had lost the lock for his bike, so he brought it into the classroom and set it against the back wall. This was against the rules because in a 200-person lecture hall, 100 bikes would crowd the room. However, this was a spacious classroom with 20 students. The professor said he didn't mind the bike being there as well. Well, the professor next door did mind. He saw this guy bringing his bike inside and told him it was against the rules. The student said, "Okay," and walked past. Next week, the professor sees the bike again and says, "If you bring that bike in here again, I'm calling the police." The student laughs it off and walks past. Next week during class, there was a knock on the classroom door. 4 police officers had shown up. One had her hand covering her face in embarrassment and said, "We received a call that said there was a bike in here which is against the rules, making this trespassing. The bike needs to leave or else we have to arrest you." The student said he doesn't have a lock and it will get stolen. The professor knocks some sense into this kid and tells him to go home because it's not worth getting arrested over one lecture. In the end, no arrests were made. I don't think there was a fine either. Police officers all had a look, saying, "Why are we here?" and they just seemed super embarrassed. The professor who called the cops probably got the bad end of that deal, though. The professor whose class was interrupted had a lot of clout at the university and didn't take kindly to the whole situation. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There was a lady that called the cops on a homeless shelter because they wouldn't let her turn the dorm into a sauna. She said she was freezing but refused blankets and wanted to use a fire hazard space heater. The cops came, saw the dorm was over 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and told her it wasn't an emergency and left. Had an elderly frequent caller report trespassing. I showed up and didn't see anyone around but her. She said the mosquitoes were landing on the neighbor's dog droppings. She distressingly explained how the mosquitoes would then fly over the fence onto her property. I heard a 911 call where an old woman called the cops because she couldn't open a jar. The woman actually sent the police to help. I went to a house for suspicious footprints in the snow. The footprints led to the oil tank, so I checked the mailbox with the homeowners and found an oil delivery receipt. Wait, you can call the police and they'll show up because of weird footprints? I got the impression that most people at least concealed the real petty reason for their calls until the officer was actually there. Like the lady who called about the trespassing and only later revealed it was mosquitoes intruding on her property. These old person needs something calls we're seeing so much happen more frequently than you'd think. I was an intern with my local police department for about 4 months. Small town of about 10,000 people. Here's a list of the really dumb ones we got. 1. An old woman couldn't back out of her driveway and asked for an officer to help spot her. 2. A woman couldn't find out how to turn off her dryer and was worried about flooding. 3. An old man's alarm clock went off and he couldn't figure out how to turn it off, and he was physically unable to bend down to unplug it. 4. A 17-year-old girl asked if there was traffic in town. That one really made me mad. And 5. An old woman literally just asked for an officer to come over. Turns out she just wanted someone to talk to. And you know what? For each of these calls, an officer was sent over to assist. A lot of people don't like cops, and sometimes it's deserved. But for the most part, cops are just normal citizens who want to help people. The first time my parents left me home alone at age 7, I called the cops because there was a man with a wrench in our fenced-in backyard. I got really scared and thought he was going to break in and hurt me. Turns out he was just fixing the pool heater. My parents weren't expecting him since he was returning to finish a job he started yesterday, which my parents thought he'd finished. The guy decided hiking the fence was easier than coming to the door and asking to be let in, plus he assumed no adults were home since no cars were there. He was in plain clothes. The cops were very nice about it and didn't yell at me, even though I dragged them out for no reason. My parents, on the other hand, will never let me live down the killer poolman of doom incident. This may be apropos of nothing, but I called the police once because there was a guy wandering the mall parking lot across the street from my houses, screaming the F word as loudly as possible, and seemed to be trying to force his way into the mall. I didn't call 911, just police HQ because it wasn't an emergency. 9 cruisers showed up within 5 minutes. Must have been a slow night. I once called the police because there were hundreds of thousands of maggots covering a huge parking lot, and I was convinced there was a body in the nearby dumpster causing the infestation. I might have been drinking a bunch. I'm an EMT and was just listening to the police channel on the radio one night. We hear, "County to district cars, we just had a female caller state there's a black male wearing a hoodie walking down her street. The unit on the road? Okay, what does she want us to do?" Dispatch said, "No idea." My partner and I laughed for a good half hour over that one. My neighbors have reported the following issues to the police. Lawn clippings on their sidewalk. Apparently my dad, who was in the hospital at the time, blew the clippings onto their side. Not having a fence around an above-ground pool and being worried that their 18-year-old kid is going to drown. The yard has a fence around it, but the pool doesn't have any barriers. It complies with local bylaws, though. Also, our dog barking overnight. We don't have a fricking dog, but they do. Our car being parked in our driveway, and they didn't have enough room to erect a non-compliant fence. Their fence partially falling over because it was installed incorrectly. Having a fire in a legal fire pit, and being worried it was going to burn their house down, which is more than 40 feet away. And having our camper parked in the driveway and not being able to see out their window. The only thing they can see out of that window is the outside wall of our house and one tree. I have dumb fricking neighbors. This isn't even the total list, just what I can remember off the top of my head. My dad in the early 80s was medicated as all hell and called the cops to report that his neighbor stole his green herb. LEO dispatcher here. A lady called into 911 to report her baby back ribs stole right off their grill, while another called in to report that a plane was flying low. Do I look like the Federal Air Association or Shane's Ribs? We dispatched and aired lookouts on both. Deputies called into the radio practically crying at 3 a.m. They were laughing so hard when I confirmed the unit for larceny, she wants her baby back ribs over our radio. Worked for the local newspaper, and we got to read all of the calls to the cops. The most hilarious one was a woman who called in to report a man driving around in his van, playing loud music and luring kids. When the cops showed up, it was the fudging ice cream man. I wish I was making this up. Some people are just nosy busybodies. Well, to be fair, that's an excellent cover for someone engaging in that particular crime. I think out of all the stupid crap we've been reading, that it at least bears checking out if people use the words luring kids. I got pulled over a year ago for speeding, 10 miles per hour over the legal speed limit, and not 1 or 2 or 3, but 4 cop cars showed up to the, quote, scene. It was in my super suburban hometown, and I'm a 5'1" female, driving a non-tinted window, smaller SUV. I think I can speak for 3 of the cops who were called that it was pretty freaking dumb. Once a lady called us claiming that her neighbor was threatening her. As it turned out, she claimed that her neighbor was plotting an attack against America. How did she figure this out? She had been going up onto his property and looking into her Middle Eastern neighbor's windows and noticed that he had a prayer rug in the middle of the room and said that he worked odd hours. She was given a stern warning about trespassing onto her neighbor's property and told to stop being such a racist idiot. I liked a Facebook page where all calls to police for incidences are posted for the county. The center of my hometown is the crossroads of 2 major state highways, and they've slowly been expanding them. Traffic is super congested in town, and I repeatedly see posts like, "Officer called to intersection of 34 and 47 because light is taking too long to change," or "Officers called to intersection of 34 and 47 because lights have changed but cars remain stopped." Really, people? This construction has been going on for years, but you're still confused? Saw a woman threatening to call the police on the staff of a kebab place in my city because other people, who had ordered before her, were served before her. She then started screaming about how her husband was a lawyer, blah blah, she'll sue, discrimination. She was escorted out by the off-duty cops who were in the place and was seen making a pathetic, groveling apology. Spoiled rich witches, male and female, waste of life and a waste of a good kebab. By the way, on the discrimination thing, this lady was white, drunk, and an idiot. About 12 years ago, I was driving home from a friend's house and I saw an injured raccoon in the middle of the road. It had likely been hit by a car and was unable to move, but it was intact and stood a chance of survival if cared for properly. In a benevolent gesture that was out of character for myself at the time, I called 411 to find out the number for animal control and was told that after midnight, the police took over for animal control. So I called the police and told them there was a hurt raccoon that needed medical attention. In a voice dripping with sarcasm, the dispatcher told me, "Okay, I'll send out an officer to look at the hurt raccoon." I got the message and took it on myself to wrap the raccoon in a shirt and move it onto the grass. It didn't struggle or try to bite. It understood I was trying to help it. In all likelihood, it died on the lawn later that evening, but at least it didn't get run over. That night I had a dream where a human-sized raccoon fed me amber liquid. I don't recall having ever tasted scotch before, but I instinctively recognized that was what it was that I was drinking. The next day, I bought a bottle of scotch and it was the same flavor from my dream. The bottle was empty by the end of the weekend and I wasn't sober again for years. I was living under a bridge by the end of it. It took me everything to overcome the crushing grip of alcoholism, but I finally got my crap together. This April makes 7 years I've been sober. A woman called 911 at 5 a.m. to report her son wouldn't get up to wash the dishes. She went to jail. Misuse of 911 is a crime in my jurisdiction. One's child not doing the dishes is not a valid use of 911 services. Backstory: we live in a 3-family home, and our landlord had agreed to rent the upstairs apartment to a couple moving from out of state without meeting them. After getting a good reference about them from the man who was hiring one of them to work for him. They were white trash, loud at all hours, severely underweight, with a filthy dog, smoked in the house, they were told not to do this, and even jimmied the washing machine open to steal quarters. The landlord didn't collect these, the washing machine was just on our neighbor's grid, and they were used to reimburse them for the utilities that were used. We shared a common entryway with these garbage people, and my boyfriend left his jacket out there. In the morning, the last few cigarettes from his pack and $2 were missing. He called the landlord to let them know. At this point, our landlord was desperate to get them out and was trying to build a case. So our landlord called the police. An officer had to come over and take a report. We felt kind of silly. In short, our landlord called the cops over $2 and a few cigarettes.
What's a harsh reality that everybody needs to hear? You can become disabled unexpectedly at any point in your life. Make sure you're taking advantage of the abilities you have while you have them. Seriously, the human body is amazing, resilient, and beautifully intricate. It is also fragile, complicated, and fallible. Never, ever ride in a car with your feet on the dash. Don't light those M80s in your hand. Don't dive headfirst into unfamiliar waters. Life is already trying to kill or maim you. Don't give it any help. There's something that traumatized me as a kid when we were learning about Ray Charles's life in music class. The man is famous for being a blind musician, but what I never knew until that day was the fact that he was neither born blind, nor did he get into a freak accident or something. He was literally just existing one day, and suddenly his eyes stopped working. Literally lost all ability to see anything permanently out of nowhere with absolutely nothing he could have done to stop it or prepare for it. It gave me a deep phobia of suddenly becoming blind that took me a while to get over. Sometimes people will hurt you and they won't care how you feel about it. Yeah, I learned this through an excruciating experience with my now ex-husband. Even now, years later, I still can't wrap my head around how he went from love to literally not caring if I live or die. Waking up every day during that period, I'd be okay for a split second, and then the reality of what was happening would hit me. I guess I was naive, but I couldn't accept that he literally didn't care. Not everyone likes you. Some people won't like you for very arbitrary reasons, or for no reason at all. It takes way too much of your energy trying to make people like you. Use that energy on yourself and your loved ones. It's a life lesson I learned much later than I could have. It's a Star Trek reference, but a very realistic one. It is possible to make no mistake and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life. Sometimes you need to accept you did everything within your power right, and it still went bad. And remember that this isn't something to beat yourself up over. These things happen. I also like the reverse of that. It's also possible to royally mess things up and still win. This one is both harsh and comforting. People don't think about you as much as you think they do. That means that your feelings might be ignored or not considered. People will forget things about you and might not remember things you've done together that were very memorable for you. And that can be hard to realize. On the other hand, they probably don't remember that embarrassing thing you did in high school, or they don't care about it. They notice patterns of behavior more than the occasional bad days that you have. So those times you feel bad about being off with someone, they probably don't think about them, unless they become frequent. Personally, I find that comforting. As David Foster Wallace wrote, you wouldn't worry so much about what other people thought of you if you realized how seldom they do. You don't realize the good/best times as they're happening. I'm trying to be more present as of recently. Since the pandemic, I've made some of the best friends I've ever had and try to keep in mind that one day I'll look back at this time period as some of my golden years. Pro tip: take pictures. Be the person you needed while you were growing up. This is the biggest lesson I've learned in my life. The only person you can really rely on is yourself. Just because you go out of your way for people, it doesn't mean they'll do the same for you. I've just recently learned this lesson. Having a bit of a cancer scare and told 2 friends last week, which both completely ignored it and continued to talk about themselves. I've seen them through breakups and family issues, and I couldn't even get a "damn, that sucks." It really messed with me. Life is not automatically easier just because you're a good person. I find the inverse is usually true. Having a moral compass and being a good person usually means you have a line in the sand somewhere, and there will always be someone who is willing to go further than you, undercut you, or outcompete you. You gotta walk your dogs. I heard someone put it this way, which really hit home. To you, it may feel like a chore, but to your dog, it's probably their favorite part of the day. Your trauma is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. This is a great one. I see a lot of people with parental issues struggle with this. I went to therapy and was diagnosed with PTSD from the way I was raised. The main thing my therapist told me was that it was 100% not my fault, but I am the one responsible for dealing with the fallout. It isn't fair, but it's the reality. I thought I'd be happy when I graduated college, or when I got my first apartment, or when I bought my first home. Don't expect happiness to be at the finish line. Happiness comes from yourself, in the now. Enjoy the process. Your first relationship most likely won't be your last. When I hear young girls say their first boyfriend is the love of their life, I just smile. That was me, madly in love at 15 and thought we'd be together forever. It makes me laugh. Thankful my first relationship was loving and respectful enough to make me hopeful for the next. I didn't expect mine to be, but 16 years later, here we are. The fact that we've grown and changed tremendously is something of which we've remained very conscious, however. Time and transition are inevitable forces which must be treated with due reverence. We do yearly, or more often as needed, state of the relationship check-ins, and waited to get married until our late 20s/early 30s. I'm far from a relationship expert, but it's worked for us so far. It won't just happen. I spent a lot of my early 20s being sad and defeatist, feeling sorry for myself. I always cope with this by telling myself that I'd make something of myself eventually, meet a woman eventually, be happy eventually. The truth is, eventually doesn't come if you don't make it come. Improvement has to be proactive. You can end up 40 years old living with your parents, playing video games all day and with no motivation. Nothing will prevent that from happening other than you. The probability of you making it as a professional gamer/streamer/YouTuber isn't worth quitting your job. You have a higher chance of getting hit by a car or winning $1 million lottery. Not saying give up, but be realistic. Keep a job that'll pay the bills while you try. I know a guy who quit a salaried career track job to be a Twitch streamer once. He got up to 8 followers. Eminem is 50 years old. The harshest reality. Hard work won't guarantee a thing, but without it, you don't stand a chance. Life is not fair. Expecting it to be will always disappoint you. People will get special treatment for all kinds of things. It will never change. Not everyone has to run to the bathroom or hunch over in pain after consuming dairy. Those cramps, that gas, it's called lactose intolerance. Get Lactaid or give up the Captain Crunch. Boneless wings are just chicken nuggets. Now that's way too far, buddy. Your life can be changed forever in the blink of an eye. You have to deal with it or die. I'm 62. I went on errands one day with my beautiful wife of 42 years, and I came home 2 hours later a widower. She died of a massive heart attack in the passenger seat. That was 13 months ago. It's been hard, but I'm still here, thanks to some wonderful people in my life. You don't have as many friends or family as you think. I have a chronic illness, and the number of people who bailed on me during my hardest times only to pop up surprised I was upset with them once I started healing is truly disgusting. You've got a core few. Nurture those relationships like your life depends on it. Mine does. I remember reading one of those "This Is My Life" articles in a magazine about 20 years ago. It was about a woman who was in a fairly fresh relationship when her boyfriend became paralyzed. Despite not being in love with him, she stayed by his side to take care of him, giving her entire life up to do so, while every one of their mutual friends basically faded into the background. About 2 years later, she realized that she and her boyfriend were basically only still together due to him now being disabled. Despite a ton of guilt, she did the right thing and broke up with him. When she later ran into those same friends of theirs, they were incredibly unfriendly to her, treating her coldly because she had abandoned her boyfriend when he needed her. The world does not owe you understanding. If you have traumas and mental health issues, it's not everyone else's job to tiptoe around you and tolerate bad behavior you refuse to address for yourself. It doesn't owe you that, no. But kindness is free. You can choose to be kind to other people with trauma and mental health issues, and it will probably cost you nothing. So why would you make the choice not to? You can be the best employee in the company, but when illness comes, like cancer, they will change you with fresh meat. P.S. Personal experience. Saw it happen to someone that had even won an award in the company for his work and had a pretty high position. He got lupus and made the mistake of being honest with the company. They fired him. I have a chronic illness that caused my resume to look wild. The longest I've ever been able to work somewhere is 1.5 years because once I get a bad enough flare, I get fired. Doesn't matter how good of a worker I am or how hard I try, once I get too sick, I'm fired. Nobody cares. Just go for it. Everybody's busy with themselves to pay attention to what you're doing. Facts. A teacher in high school taught me that at the end of the day, nobody cares about you. Nobody is going to bed at night thinking of your problems. And it always stuck with me. Brutal honesty without tact is just brutality. You're not being as helpful as you think you are by claiming to offer other people harsh truths. A great phrase I've heard is there's a difference between being honest and weaponizing the truth. People who pride themselves on being brutally honest are more excited about getting to be brutal than they are interested in being honest. On the subject, I really like the quote, "I don't accept tough love from anyone who hasn't shown me gentle love." Youth is wasted on the young. Before you know it, you're 40, 50, wondering where the years went. So stop caring what people think about you. Ask him or her out. Start that business. Tell your family you love them, even if you're in a fight with them. You might be 30 thinking it's too late to do that thing you wanted to do. Do it now. Or else you'll be 40 wishing you had done it when you were 30. 50 wishing you had done it at 40. Just start it now. Working hard doesn't guarantee success. It may not guarantee it, but it sure increases the odds significantly. It also depends on the person's definition of success. For most of us, work is a business transaction. You're trading your time for money. Your employer isn't your friend, father, or mother. They owe you what they promised to give you in exchange for your time. That's it. If your work isn't fulfilling or making you happy, either spend your free time making yourself happy or work somewhere else. The few people who live in the wealthiest countries in the world still struggle to find happiness. Stop wanting what other people have because it looks like it makes them happy. They aren't any happier or better than you because they have things. Finally, while these facts suck for most of us, the sooner you internalize them and shift your values, the better you'll be. Most people should not be on social media of any kind because they cannot handle what it does to them mentally. It's not about socialization. It's about corporations monetizing your life. Many of us were the frog slowly boiled in the monetization of the internet. We started out when it was a place corporate media laughed at and we had our space and our fun, we were left to ourselves. Slowly, ads and marketing and data collection creeped in and none of us noticed the internet fundamentally changed. Some of us did, even subconsciously, but we were already engaged, habituated. Now it can seem very hard to pull away and find some meaningful life that isn't connected to everyone else 24/7. Children's first bullies are often their parents. It's very sad but true. A parent is often the first bully in the life of a child. They might not often be their bullies, but they are at most the first ones, and sadly many parents may even be unintentional bullies, causing more harm than good. Nobody wants to hear your music either from your car or from your headphoneless phone. I feel this one. I live near a busy street with a stoplight and people blast their music so loud it sounds like it's in my house. Loud music is one thing and I don't love that either, but man, this is a whole other level. You are responsible for your own happiness. But that doesn't mean that you have to make it alone. You make friends, ask for help, lift each other up. There's plenty of opportunities that we can look out for each other. If you're spending 30 minutes every day in the toilet after lunch and still saying you shouldn't have had Taco Bell for lunch, maybe it's time to see a doctor or stop going there for lunch. If you ate food from Taco Bell and expected not to be toilet bound for at least 30 minutes, then you might need to rethink your life choices and get a new toilet. The good old days were rarely good old days when we were young. Rose-colored glasses, nostalgia vision, whatever you want to call it, the good old days probably weren't as good as you're thinking. Yes, they were. I got to play RuneScape all day without any repercussions. When you buy a pet, know that you are in all likelihood going to outlive them. You need to mentally prepare yourself for that inevitable day. No, my pup and I talk every day about how she's going to live forever. A lot of success comes down to luck. People can work extremely hard, do everything right, be the most qualified/best person, and they totally get overlooked for someone else. A huge reason some people are winners and some people are losers is just straight up dumb luck. I'm very successful by almost any standard, but I used to be broke, friendless, and basically treated as useless/worthless. I went to college and worked hard, but yes, there was a lot of luck involved, and a little help from my family and the government. So many successful people I know are so deluded, they think that because they worked hard and succeeded, that's all it takes. It's not. Nobody knows what's happening. Not Buddhists, not Catholics, not governments, not feminists, not scientists, not capitalists, etc., etc., etc. No one. Obviously, no one knows everything, but I'd argue scientists know a lot more about certain information than other people. We're just electrical meat sacks made up of many other living things hurtling through space on a rock trying to understand why things do. Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV. To those that do it, the internet isn't the reason why you bully. It's also not an excuse. You bully because you're projecting your own insecurities onto someone else. Also, just because you were bullied in high school doesn't mean you aren't a bully now. That high you get when you trash someone on Twitter and get a lot of affirmation from others? Yeah, you're being a bully. Reddit isn't the world, and getting downvotes or upvotes amount to nothing. Also, your waifu isn't real. I get the sense that a lot of people think Reddit is reflective of a perfect slice of humanity at large, and that's just not true. Your circle jerk means nothing. This ain't real life, kid. Enjoy your upvotes, but that's all they are. All animal life on this planet is going through a mass extinction. There's now 70% less today when compared to 1970, and that's caused by man. There are too many people on the planet. Its ability to support the existing human population could decline dramatically at any time. All of us will struggle to simply survive if/when this happens. In a conversation, most people aren't really listening to you. They're focused on when they can say their piece. Chances are you're doing this too. One of the best criticisms I got as a teenager was, "You're too busy thinking about what you're going to say to hear what I'm saying." It made me realize that as soon as I heard something I wanted to argue, I started building that argument and missed the rest of the comment. Making myself listen and learning to ask to make sure that what they said and what I heard was the same allowed me to become much better at resolving disagreements. The more important lesson I learned after that was how to let people be wrong. If it doesn't matter, I'm not going to worry about it. There will always be someone better than you at what you do best. Yep, and that's why you should only compare yourself to your previous self, not someone else. It's fine to look at others to see what might be possible for you, but you shouldn't use it to feel bad about yourself. Disliking popular things is not a personality. If everyone instead focused on what they liked, the world would be like 25% better overnight. The worst people are the best person to someone. They've done something good for someone. The best people are the worst to someone. They've done something bad to someone. People are dichotomous. They're gray. You can hate and love and fear the same person at the same time. Sometimes death is a kindness, but at the same time, everyone dies alone. Death is scary, and no matter how bad you feel, there is always something good. It may be something small, a pretty color, a nice texture, a good smell, a sweet note. On a lighter note, toast always falls jelly down. What would be a funny thing to say to a surgeon before anesthesia kicks in 5 seconds later? I had broken my wrist and was being put under to have 4 pins inserted. They gave me anesthesia through an IV, and I felt coldness spreading up my arm and across my chest. The nurse asked how I was doing, and I said, This must be what dying feels like. I heard her say, "Oh my God," and then I was out. So, did you die? Yes. Dude, I broke my wrist too. 4 pins and a plate, same exact sensation, comment, and a shocked face response from the anesthesiast. Are you me? You are me reincarnated. Can't believe you're dead. Yeah, the worst part is how much the Wi-Fi in this casket sucks. I'm sure the Wi-Fi will be the least of his worries once his battery dies. Wow, I actually have a relevant story that happened recently. As I was getting ready to go under, they were placing a device in my mouth to keep me from biting down on the scope they were going to use for the endoscopy. Think medical ball gag, but a hard plastic ring instead of a ball. As the gal was placing it in, I asked, "Wait, what's the safe word?" I heard a good amount of laughing as the world turned black. "I'm awake" would probably be a good safe word. Related comment, but doesn't really answer the question. My dad was in the middle of a surgery repairing some pretty nasty damage on his wrist after a skiing accident. He was under heavy anesthesia, but the surgeons were having serious trouble with the screws in his wrist, which apparently jarred him around enough to wake him up. He noticed their struggles and managed to say, "Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey." Then he passed back out. This is the most dad thing I've ever heard. How do you keep a surgeon in suspense? This is the best one yet. Shame it's buried so deep in the thread. It's over my head. Explanation, please? Okay, here's what it means. I hate you so much for that joke. Before going under for wisdom teeth, the doctor said I might feel funny. They pushed the drugs and asked if I felt any different. My butthole, and only my butthole, began to itch like crazy. And it was hot. Not warm, hot, like I just ate peppers with my butt. I told them my butthole is itching like crazy, and the assistant was really bad at holding back a laugh. The doc resisted mightily, but he too succumbed to my newly discovered butthole emotions. They actually gave me some kind of drug that had the exact same effect when I had surgery. They warned me prior though, and I kind of laughed it off until it actually happened. Newly Discovered Butthole Emotions is the title of my memoir. As the anesthesiologist was putting me under, he said I'd start to feel sleepy soon. I asked him, "Aren't I supposed to be counting back from 100 or something?" He replied, "I don't know, I must have skipped that class." Being an anesthesiologist must be awesome as you can always get the last word in. The last anesthesiologist I had messed with me too. He asked what I did for a living, so I told him. And he said, "Wow, that's a cool job. I wish I'd done something like that instead of this." Ugh. Well, bye. And I was out. But I woke up laughing, which was great for an otherwise stressful and confusing day. Got my spleen out a few years back. My anesthesiologist said, "Did you get some photos of that thing? Because once we got it, it's gone." Right before I blacked out. Those guys have always been my favorite every time I've had surgery. They're so chill and funny, and somehow that doesn't concern me since they're the ones basically keeping you alive. Had surgery about a year ago. As the anesthesiologist was getting me ready, he asked me if I'd done anything fun recently. I'd just gotten back from the Sasquatch Music Festival, so I told him that. Last thing I remember him saying was, "Well, this will feel more like a Grateful Dead concert." I was being put under for a wisdom tooth extraction a few years back, and it was the first time I'd ever had anesthesia. They used injection method rather than the gas, so they told me to watch the fluids going in so I could gauge when I'd feel sleepy. I had this idea I would say something like, "Oh no, doc, I've lost my eyesight," or something else preposterous. Before I could collect my thoughts, I just immediately blurted, "Well then," and passed out. Last time I went under, as I started to fade, I said, "You're gonna have to drive, I'm messed up." Probably came out, "You're gonna have to drive, I'm messed up." I said something similar, except it was when I woke up. The doc asked how I was feeling, and I said, "Fine, I've been drunker than this before. Good thing I'm not driving." I was seriously messed when I woke up from that chair. Despite what I said, I have never been so drunk I needed a wheelchair and 2 people to get me in the car. When I had my exploratory laparotomy for ovarian cancer, I wrote on my chest, "Insert superpowers here," with the arrow pointing down to the incision site. Waking from anesthesia one time, I heard someone say, "His blood pressure is a little high." Then I mumbled, "That must be the anesthesiast assistant's fault." Then they kind of startled and asked quickly, "Why's that?" Becoming slightly more coherent, I continued to say, "She's really hot." They all laughed and said, "He'll be fine," and released me from there. I had some temporary amnesia after waking up from an hour-long emergency surgery. My girlfriend was there and found me staring puzzled at her. "Hey, Sleepy, it's me, your girlfriend." Me. Wow, I must be a lucky dude. Happily together for more than 2 years now. Plot twist, the assistant was a big hairy dude. I'm okay with that. So after my dad had a triple bypass and was just waking up and they'd removed the breathing tube, I was in the room with him. I said something along the lines of, "Everything went perfect with your surgery, Dad, no problems." My dad and his drug haze said, "That is because I am a perfect specimen of the human male and it couldn't have gone any other way." Nurses were cracking up. If he was a perfect specimen, he wouldn't have needed a triple bypass now, would he? Got to admit they have a point. If something goes wrong and I go into a coma, don't you dare cut my coma beard. Yes, ma'am. I had to get some surgery that involves cutting open my head. Right before they gassed me, I said, "I should warn you, there's a spooky skeleton in there." The last thing I remember is his response of, "I'll try to look out for that." Did they find it? I don't know if they found it, but I'm pretty sure part of it escaped. If I don't make it through this, then tell my wife I want her to be buried alive with me. If I don't make it out alive, tell my wife I changed the Netflix password and she'll never know it. You're a sick person. Tell my wife I love her. Work ethic. Or just, if I don't make it through this, tell my wife. I would hope someone would tell her. They had a thing checking my heart and it fell off and it flatlined. I told them, "Oh no, you've killed me. Quick, we're losing me." For a second, I thought it was referring to your heart, like your heart fell out onto the floor. It was an awful botched wisdom tooth extraction. I tend to get massive erections while under anesthesia, but it's fine, just tape it down if it gets in the way. We'll just cover it with this thimble. Yo, let me know if you see my phone in there. This is so dumb yet so good. Keeping this for my next colonoscopy. When I got my wisdom teeth out, the dentist's office was right next to a funeral home. I told the guy that if anything went horribly wrong, they could just take me next door. Mother and doctor were not amused. I mean, at least it's close and convenient. As they were pushing the drugs, they asked me to count down backwards from 10. All I could say was no. The room erupted with laughter and I was out. When I was a kid, they told me to count back from 10, so I did. I got all the way to 0 and all the doctors were looking at one another extremely confused. Then, just before they were about to do something, I conked out. I had my wisdom teeth out a couple weeks ago. I really hate the idea of going unconscious, so when they told me it's starting and if I wanted to count backwards from 10, I was like, don't tell me. I wanted to just pretend like I was falling asleep on my own. That seems entirely reasonable to me. They told me to breathe in and that I would pass out by the third breath. One breath later and I'm waking up in the waking room. They never even gave me a chance. Can you count backwards from 10? Will I, or am I able to? I had my appendix removed in 2007. I was in the prep room about to get on the anesthesia and the anesthesiologist kept asking me what my name was as he was about to put me under. After 3 times, I remember saying, "Even though I keep saying it, I just forgot. Crap." And then I was out. I had to have a pilonidal cyst removed from my butt crack and can remember giggling like a madman because I asked the entire operating room, "So who drew the short straw and has to shave my butt?" The honest answer to that question is the medical student. I shaved so many butts, and then you have to take tape and use it to collect all the shaved hairs so they don't get all over the sterile field. Ugh, so glad I'm not going into surgery. When I had my wisdom teeth removed and was given general anesthetic, I apparently said, "If this is what being on drugs is like, sign me up." He went and told on me to my mother. I said a similar thing when I had minor surgery done. I got shot up with something to take the edge off before they rolled me into the operating room. I remember announcing that the drug they gave me felt like being drunk, but without all the calories. Apparently, I spent a good amount of time telling the dentist all about my aunt's goat farm. When the doctor told my mom this, she replied, "His aunt doesn't have a goat farm." The fact that you said "if" should be good news for her. It would have been worse if you had said, "These are the best drugs I've had since that Colombian gap year." Luckily, I cried about going home to feed my pet hamster. I never had a pet hamster. Same experience, but apparently I said, "Man, I need to do this again." I asked for a tummy tuck while being wheeled in for a bowel resection. I said, "While you're cutting it open, just cut some off." Then when I was done with my surgery, but still pretty messed up on drugs, I asked if I was skinny and then cried when my doctor told me he didn't give me the tummy tuck. I asked for a tummy tuck after both of my C-sections. Doc gave me the same answer each time. I make it work, I don't make it pretty. I went in for an endoscopy and colonoscopy, or as the staff referred to it, a double. Before they put me under, the doc asked if I had any questions. I said, "Just so I'm clear, you're putting a tube in my mouth and in my rear, right?" "Right. Can you put it in my mouth first?" "Don't worry, if we start in the other end, we'll just spit on it and wipe it off." That's hilarious. I love when they're jokey. When doctors are too serious, it makes me uncomfortable. Right before I went under to have surgery on my septum, I was about to start counting backwards before they put the mask on, and I asked, "Does anyone need anything while I'm out?" The last thing I remember was an OR room full of people laughing hysterically. I'm gonna need to get surgery just so I can use this. Legit Bill Murray level. I like it. The other way around, I was cracking jokes with the nurses and anesthesiologist before a big surgery and everyone was laughing. Anesthesiologist turns to me and says, "Well, it's not fair that you're the only one not on anything," and then hit me with the anesthesia and I was out. That's awesome. First thing on waking up, run hands over own body to make sure all parts are there. Seriously though, you could wake up feeling pretty scared after that. I said to my doctor during my wisdom teeth extraction, "Doc, don't start, I'm still awake." To which he said, "We're already done. Those drugs are legit." Actually, it's scary just how much you don't feel time pass while under those drugs. Last thing I remember on my last wisdom tooth surgery, I told the dentist that I worked with food grade nitrous and that it might take a small amount more. Don't know if I said anything afterward. I woke up in their recovery room. To the surgeon and nurse, I just want you both to know, good luck. We're all counting on you. I'd imagine you waking up several times during surgery to say that line again. Pre-op, Marco. Post-op, Polo. Simple, straight to the point, no fluffer. This is perfect. Pre, legend, post, dairy. I told them that I hadn't pooped that morning, and if I pooped on them, it's their fault for scheduling the surgery at 6 a.m. Then I passed out. Well, don't leave us hanging, did you? Nah, painkiller's so good, I didn't poop for a week. I feel like as the doctor in this situation, you'd just be on guard the entire time. Last time I went under, I started to feel a sort of paralysis and couldn't move. Me. Whoa, did you just give me something? Nurse. Yes, just relax and don't fight it. Me. Okay, but you should sell this stuff in the gift shop. Everybody laughs. Surgeon. Are you okay? Me. Yeah, but I'm disappointed there's no cake. Surgeon. On the recovery notes, write, give the patient cake. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in the recovery room with a slice of chocolate cake on the table next to me. I should have asked for cake. Hell yeah, free cake. I'm envisioning an episode of Seinfeld where George figures out he can get free cake by this simple little trick and ends up having multiple operations just for more cake. I do have to say though, kudos to the doctor for taking care of all their patients' needs. My wife went to the dentist last weekend. After several shots of numbing, she sang to him, "I can't feel my face when I'm with you." To the dentist's credit, without batting an eyelid, he replied in full voice, "'Cause I numbed it." When my appendix burst, I was being wheeled in, and as the doctor was getting ready and I was about to pass out, he said, "Geez, this is rusty," and held up a scalpel. I could tell he was joking, and off I went to sleep. When I woke up, he came to check on me, and the first thing he said was, "Have you seen my watch?" I swear, he was a very funny man, and it really helped calm me down in a situation where I nearly died. Okay, so I know this is late in the thread, but when I was 15, I had tight foreskin around my penis and I opted for circumcision. My doctor, Dr. Lenz, was the funniest dude I've ever met. He told me I was gonna have something like a Frankenpenis for a month or two, but it's cool. Anyways, I'm in the OR on Christmas Eve and I feel the anesthesia starting to kick in, and before Dr. Lenz walks out, I shout/slur, "Doc, please just take care of the little guy." And he stops, turns around, bows to me and says, as if he were my own. I laughed once and passed out. I was being wheeled into emergency abdominal surgery once and my girlfriend was with me. We're rolling down the hall and they have the mask out to put me under, and I pause and I say to her, "Don't let them touch my penis." The nurse smirked a little and they put the mask on me. In a somewhat panicked fashion, I pulled the mask off, stared up at my girlfriend, and with full weight and seriousness told her they can look at it, but no touching. I heard the doctor laughing as the gas kicked in. Best part is there's a good chance they gave you a catheter. I had a nervous moment when I had my surgery when the nurse came in afterwards and says, "Okay, we need to take the catheter out." I did a double take and said, "I feel like this is something I should have noticed." That and the first thing I said when I woke up was telling my nurse she was beautiful and then immediately puking blood. Don't worry, I'm sure she was charmed by your interaction. Similar, I had some kidney stones and they had to go up there to unblock my parts, if you know what I mean. As I was waking up from anesthesia, I apparently asked, "How many people saw my pee-pee?" A few minutes later, as I was a little more coherent, I asked the nurse what's the craziest thing she heard from someone waking up from anesthesia. Her answer, "How many people saw my pee-pee?" Good times. So, how many people saw your pee-pee? Never actually got an answer, but I would probably say 4 or 5. It's just funny because who calls it a pee-pee after their 5th birthday? Who's the guy with the scythe standing in the corner? Oh, that's the other surgeon. He's just sitting in. I just went under this past week. I told my doctor, I better not wake up with any penises drawn on my face. The room had a laugh and I went to sleep, and they performed the worst magic trick ever and made a camera disappear up my butt. I remember being a celeb at the hospital after I said, I love my girlfriend because she's got big boobies. When I'd go in, I'd have doctors and nurses teasing me. I was 16 at the time. Here's to relapsing. This is so wrong, I'll have to remember it. If the doc doesn't realize you're joking, this is a great way to not get prescribed any real pain medication for after the surgery. I beat the anesthesia. Had a patient fight anesthesia once. After his head hit the pillow, the anesthesiologist said, "Resistance is futile." I laughed so hard at this, my cab driver literally just asked me if I was okay. A couple of years ago, while I was being prepped for bone surgery, I had a good rapport with the anesthesiologist. My dad is one, and we kept talking about pain management and such. He pushed the dose of ketamine and propofol into my IV, and my brain was getting foggy. I remember seeing him laughing as I went to sleep. When I woke up, my friend who was attending the surgery told me that while I was dozing off, I told the surgeon, "This is my very first time trying ketamine unrecreationally." Hopefully he doesn't say anything to your dad at the next conference. Doctors, nurses who deliver babies, what are some of the strange/funny things people have screamed while giving birth? When my brother was born, they had to use forceps to get him out. My mom saw them and screamed, "Those are salad tongs. You are not putting any kitchenware in there." When I gave birth and they pulled out the forceps, I thought they looked like ice tongs, not salad tongs. Much bigger. The doctor who controlled the pain meds saw my face and asked if I wanted to remember any of this. I said, nope. Last thing I remember. My mother's labor was extremely short. I was born within an hour. So that means that she went from experiencing minimal pain to extreme pain with little time to adjust. When my dad was driving her to the hospital, he unfortunately had to stop for gas. He went in to pay, and just then an elderly man in a wheelchair stopped him, asking him to buy cigarettes for him as the store was not wheelchair accessible. My mom then proceeded to lean out of the window yelling, "Don't help the cripple." We have never let her forget that one. Edit. Didn't think anyone would actually see this. I'm glad everyone got a good laugh out of it. I'm sorry to laugh at your mom, but damn, that was funny. My mom had a similar quick labor due to medical issues. 15 minutes from first contractions to labor. There was an accident on the side of the road and my father slowed down while going past and my mom screamed, "Screw them, hurry up!" Epic fail. Last trimester, keep at least half a tank in the car. If we had to stop for gas, I'd have killed someone. I imagine the mom from Malcolm in the Middle as the pregnant woman yelling that. I believe at that point you can say, "Sorry dude, my wife is in labor," and any normal human being will go, "Okay." My roommate and I just finished our labor and delivery rotation in July. During one of the births she was helping out in, the mom and the dad were separated but still good friends. So while this woman is pushing out her baby, she begins to half tell/half scream that my roommate should date her ex/the baby daddy. The conversation went something like this. "Mom, you should really, go out with, him sometime. He's really fun." "Dad, I wouldn't mind getting some drinks sometime. What are you doing this evening?" No, she did not go out with him. That would make a heck of a love story. He actually said, "What are you doing this evening? Shouldn't you be with your newborn baby?" I get that they weren't together, but still. Seriously though, my friend, there's a time and a place. Paramedic here delivered a baby for a lady who did not realize she was pregnant and called us for abdominal pain. Patient: "You're an idiot. I am not pregnant." Me: "Well, I can see a head crowning." Patient: "That must be a tumor." The tumor was a healthy baby girl. Mom was totally sweet afterwards, by the way. Holy crap, was she a big lady? That's crazy. My mother-in-law didn't know she was pregnant with my husband until she was 7.5 months along. She said she thought it was well-packed fat. Yeah, she is a big lady. Her wedding pictures she was 8 months pregnant in, and you couldn't tell. When my sister was in labor, she was screaming, and our mom was trying to be comforting, saying, "It'll be okay, take some deep breaths, it'll be over soon." Then my sister looks up at our mom and says, "You have no idea what this is like. You just wouldn't understand, Mom." I hope your mom never let her forget saying it. My sister told me while she was in labor that she changed her mind and wanted to go home. Sorry sister, too late. Plot twist, both children are adopted, only the sister knows though. Patient, fully dilated, started pushing, then changed her mind. "I don't want to do this, I'm going home." And then tried to get off the table. This happens. I can't believe this happens. Fear 101. Question that I don't want to Google for the risk of pictures. What does it mean, dilated? I've never understood this. Edit. I got the answer already. I'm gonna get nightmares if y'all go into any more detail. My friend's mom, who's a midwife, told me that once she found a woman in labor walking around the ward with her bags packed, saying she's changed her mind and was going home. You delivered my baby girl. Sorry about trying to leave. At the time, I just felt that way. I did this. I was only half dilated though. I just said I wanted to come back another day. My husband said he didn't think it worked that way. He was right, but man did I beg to go home and just put it off another few days. The epidural kicked in and I was good after that. My mom tried this when she was having me, but my nan was there and told her, "Get back on that bed now." I'm being induced in about 14 hours? What should I do instead? When I hit transition, I started crying. I don't want kids. I don't even like kids. EMT who did a birth on the side of the road. Woman shouted, "Screw me," during a contraction, and the husband casually replied, "That's how we got into this mess." I had a very hard time containing myself. Pretty sure my husband said this exact thing to me while I was delivering our daughter. My husband and I have a tendency to enjoy witty banter during labor. It's just how we are. During the labor of our youngest, 27 hours in, he said something and I replied, "Do you want to push him out?" Without missing a beat, he replied, "I already did and thousands more like him." Our nurse was expecting me to be angry, but I totally cracked up. He's so funny. Husband already kicking out the dad jokes and his child isn't even fully born yet. I said that to the doctor during her prenatal exam. "Just lie back and relax. This will only take a minute." That's how this whole thing started, doctor. One lady was too posh to swear when in pain from contractions. She just said, "Jeepers creepers." I hadn't laughed out loud at this threat until I got to this one. That's the safe word my wife and I use. I held off on swearing, but at one point I thought my husband and I were alone in the room. That gas makes your mind kind of cloudy. And I asked him where the fudge the chick who was coming to do the epidural was. The midwife was still in the room. She thought it was pretty funny. I had the pleasure of assisting a woman in the most beautiful, textbook perfect natural birth ever to take place in a hospital. In her birth plan, she warned us that she might do some cussing, to which I said, "You couldn't offend me if you tried. Yell whatever you like." What does she blurt out while pushing? "Owie." When I was born, my dad didn't know that babies are usually born face down. And as I was coming out, he screams, "Oh my God, she doesn't have a face." That made me laugh so hard my dog came over to see what was going on. I have tears running down my face right now. Thank you so much for sharing this. I was high on meds at the time, and I was begging for barbecue ribs in between contractions. "Come on, honey, the nurses will never know." They were standing right there. "Did you get the barbecue ribs?" I wasn't on meds and still thought it was perfectly fine to say, "Honey, leave now, run down the road and bring me back a burrito with guac and hots." I really wanted a burrito. My mom told my dad to get her Taco Bell and he said, "No, you're in labor." Apparently, when my aunt was giving birth, she was all jokes. Very angry jokes, but jokes nonetheless. "Knock, knock. Who's there? The baby? Not yet." I'm picturing a woman in labor bellowing this angrily and just cracking up. Not a doctor, but a father. When my first child was born, his head was kind of misshapen, and when the doctor lifted him up to show my wife, she yelled, "Why does he look like a raptor?" I lost it. My mom almost punched her best friend when I came out with my head all funny. My mom said, "How does she look?" And her friend's response was, "Kind of like E.T." My mom didn't have any sense of humor about it. I had bright orange hair when I was born. It's since softened out to a nice strawberry blonde, but baby pictures are pretty interesting to look at. My mom always says that when I popped out, my dad just started giggling and calling me Carrot Top. I had to be kept at the hospital for a while due to some weird stuff, and soon all the doctors and nurses were talking about baby girl Carrot Top. My mom was not happy about the nickname. My dad told me they thought I was a girl all the way up to birth. I came out as a C-section, the doctor goes, "This one's got some extra equipment." Mine's the opposite. I came out all girl and my dad told the doctor he must have dropped something and to look again. My wife told me in a satanic voice to get better ice chips. These suck. I'm not sure what the quality issue was, but I ran and got her a different cupful. The nurses kept trying to give me ice chips and telling my boyfriend to give them to me between pushing. And at one point, I got pissed and told them, "No, I don't want it." I was too busy pushing a baby out of my vagina to eat any ice chips. I'm a nurse, but I'm also a mom. My husband told me when I was breathing the laughing gas, I screamed, "I'm Lady Darth Vader," as I was pushing. Then I asked the doctor if he felt my tonsils when he had his arm up there. These are my coworkers. I hope they let you live it down. What memories you made with them. Their time will come. I made this account purely to tell you that I'm in a room of sleeping people and woke them all up with my laughing because this is the funniest thing I've ever read. Thank you so much. I'm a nurse, and one of the strangest things that I've seen happen while someone is giving birth is one patient decided to tell her boyfriend that it wasn't his baby. That made the whole room silent, and the boyfriend just left without saying a thing. My wife worked as a nurse near a military base and had so many women grab her during labor when the husband would step out to go to the bathroom or was across the room and say, "Tell him the baby is early or late. I had an affair while he was deployed and it's not his." I always felt bad for them. An ex-girlfriend did this to me. Dated her for about 7 months and the baby was supposedly 2 months premature. Kid came out with a full head of hair, lifted his head and looked around the room. I asked for a blood test. Mom of the girlfriend cursed me royally. Turns out kid wasn't mine, and I never saw that woman since that day. During labor, about a half an hour before the god-awful ripping and tearing, I was losing my mind. My older sister panicked and sort of ran around the room. My mom, the birth coach, said to my sister to give me a focal point, something to concentrate on so I didn't jump out of the nearest window. My sister lifted her shirt and showed us her boobs. Hilarity and awful pain ensued. Way to take the tension out of a difficult moment. After a long contraction, I said quietly, "I'm gonna set everyone in this room on fire." Everyone laughed, including the nurse, but I think my devoutly Christian mother-in-law started to cry. It's times like this that I wish I was a woman, so that I can scream wildly inappropriate and zany things during my pregnancy. Then I say that again and realize I just wished I could give birth roughly aware of how painful it might be. I'm good. Not exactly during labor, but right after. I had a very bad tear during natural childbirth, which meant lots of stitches. Add to that, it was training day for one of the med students, and it was taking a long time. A really long time. Finally, I looked down between my knees and asked, "What are you doing? Are you guys weaving a friendship bracelet down there?" Both doctors, the intern, and the med student burst out laughing so hard they had to stop working. Apparently, there was some issue with how the intern was stitching me up, and things had gotten tense. This lightened the mood quite a bit. I'm sure this helped the med student feel a lot better in what was a very tense moment for them. After I had my son, I was pretty wasted on all the pain meds they'd given me. I looked up at my husband and said, "Honey, Condoleezza Rice is out there waiting for me. Tell her I can't come out to play today. I just had a baby." Condoleezza Rice must spend a lot of time traveling people's hallucinations. When my mom was in the hospital, for other reasons, she was yelling at Condoleezza Rice to stop trying to give her cigarettes. I had a C-section and was pretty out of it. When they held up my daughter and said, "Here's your baby," I responded, "That's not mine. I've never seen it before in my life. Take it to the lost and found." I've never seen it before in my life. Well, there's some accuracy in that statement. As a nursing student, I was watching a planned C-section. The procedure was being performed by the senior resident. Everything seemed to be going well when I heard the resident mutter, "Whoops," and I looked up and saw blood squirting out, pulsing. She fixed the artery very quickly, but it obviously freaked out mom and dad. Everything turned out okay for mom and the baby. Whoops is definitely not something you want to hear from your surgeon or anyone similar. I had a dentist say whoops as he drilled through my tongue. Good thing tongues heal well. As someone with a C-section scheduled soon, this would scare the ever-living crap out of me. First words to my son, "You better be awesome," because that hurt a lot. For her sake, I really do hope he was. We hired a doula for our first kid 4 years ago. She told us a story that I still laugh about. She was with a couple that had been told they were having a daughter as their first kid. So, like first-time parents, they outdid themselves with everything pink, sparkly, and frilly, the whole 9 yards. Mom goes into labor and they call the doula to come in to be there for the birth. Mom's pushing, dad is cheerleading nervously, and the baby pops out and the doula notices that the sonogram tech that said they were having a girl messed up. The dad is too busy to notice anything is amiss. So the doula tells the dad to do a finger and toe count to clue him in. So the dad looks at the baby, sees 10 fingers, 10 toes, and 1 penis. Now, he'd been told he was having a daughter for the past 6 months and sees a penis, and the first thing he screams is, "Oh my god, my daughter has a penis!" Just give him a minute, he'll figure it out. A friend's mom is a nurse. Nurse, have you seen the mucus plug? Woman in labor. Yeah, that moron went out to have a cigarette. Sounds like he'll be having a talking to when he gets back. A young couple, mom and dad, were both around 18 if I recall correctly. First baby for them both. Mom's pushing and dad is doing this awkward jig, wanting to be helpful, but not really knowing how to be helpful. At one point I say, "Okay, we can see the head now, still a while to go," and dad jumps up, runs to the counter, puts on rubber gloves, and gets into football receiving position like 10 feet away from mom's legs. We all burst out laughing and he was very embarrassed to learn that babies do not shoot out across the room to be caught like a football. Aw, buddy. Well, the important thing is that's what he thought would happen, and he was ready. Quality dad material right there. When my mother was pregnant, she and my dad decided to have an amnio. A stand-in doctor was there the day she found out the results, and despite my mom's instructions that she did not want to be told the sex, the doctor congratulated her on having a healthy little boy. My mom freaked out and decided not to tell my dad so as to not ruin the surprise. Fast forward to the day of my birth, I'm brought into this bright world without a penis. The doctors congratulate my mother on her little girl. My mom responds by yelling, "You've got to be freaking kidding me." Silence from everyone in the room. The doctor then has a serious chat with my mom about loving me even though I'm a girl, etc, etc. Turns out the amnio results were mixed up with another woman of the same name. Yeah, quite the confuzzle. She wanted a surprise. Sometimes you get what you wish for. He didn't tell her the sex. He told her the opposite sex. Not a doctor, but during the birth of my firstborn, I kept screaming, "I gotta poop, I gotta poop." Actually, it was just her head creating pressure as it was coming down the birth canal. It felt just like an 8-pound poop. Same thing happened to my mom with me. Apparently, she kept trying to walk around, telling everybody that she really needed to take a dump as she was in labor. That was the worst feeling than labor pain for me. The feeling that you have to poop so badly, but it just won't come out, and that dire urge to poop was there the whole time I was pushing. So 30 minutes of fighting a monster poop on top of a bowling ball forcing its way out of my vagina. No bueno. No one was responding to the call button as my mom was giving birth, so she yelled, "Do something, honey." So my dad ran out into the hall and screamed at the top of his lungs, "It's showtime and I'm not a very good catcher." When I read "It's showtime," I read it as Beetlejuice. Made it even funnier. The delivery nurse for my son's birth was about 4'11". She kept talking to me and I couldn't see her over my belly and legs. It was really frustrating. She said, "Do you want me to pull down the mirror so you can see?" I was like, "I don't need the play-by-play, let's just do this." I apologized afterwards and she laughed. That was me. The nurses kept trying to romanticize the moment and make it memorable, and I just wanted it to be over so I could go home. I remember they brought the mirror over to me to see my daughter's head crowning in order to motivate me. My cousin started laughing at the face I made when I saw it. Just glad they took the mirror away after that, and glad I didn't get to see anything else. My fiance is a doctor and my mother's a nurse, so I'm claiming the titles by association for the purposes of this thread. My mother was unexpectedly having her 4th child and chose not to find out the sex. We like surprises everywhere apparently. For some reason, she became convinced it was a boy and would have bet the house on it. In the delivery room, they hand the baby to my dad and he joyfully tells my mom that they have a new baby girl. Mom, what? No, check again. Dad, I'm pretty sure it's a girl, honey. Mom, you're not looking hard enough. My older sister cried when she found out I was a boy, and both of my older brothers danced in jubilation. What have you witnessed someone do that made you realize he or she is really, really smart? My wife's grandfather. He's a retired electrical engineer with a dozen patents to his name and a long list of recognitions I can't be bothered to remember or name. I always knew he was brilliant, but never realized just how until one day last year we were visiting and he got a phone call. Keep in mind he's been retired for 20 years and is 86 years old. The phone call was from an electrical engineering firm from halfway across the globe asking if they could fly him out to a site and have him consult on the energy capture of a hydroelectric dam they were building. They'd run into a problem that none of them, all the electrical engineers, could solve. They had consulted 3 of the top university departments in the US on the issue, and the last one had referred them to him. 20 minutes on the phone and he agreed to think about it. 2 days later, he'd solved their issue and written the solution on a single 8x11 sheet of paper which he scanned and emailed to the company. He said he took so long to write it up because he didn't want to have to fly all the way out there at his age. His explanation was so clear I was able to understand and follow it with no relevant higher education. I spent a year trying to track down an intermittent issue with my car. An older gentleman on the forum had suggested a likely cause, but I disregarded it as the parts had already been replaced. Sure enough, he was right, and I managed to follow from that to find the other half of the problem. Saved me so much trouble. I had a mechanic look at it, I'd spent hours tearing my hair out trying to fix it. Nothing worked prior to that. Respect your elders, folks. He should write a book / at the bare minimum document what he knows so that it can be converted to a book or just published publicly. He's clearly an expert in his field and his knowledge is invaluable. Everything he can write down can only better humanity. He has contributed to several textbooks over the years. He sounds like the kind of guy you should just sit down one day and say, "Tell me everything you know." Better pack a lunch though. One time, my drunk uncle was in jail and needed bail money, and being that my dad was the only one in the family with any real savings, they all looked to him to fork up 100% of the cash. Having been asked, he realized the situation had 2 possible outcomes. 1, pay for his bail and never get the money back, or 2, not pay for the bail and the whole family blame him for it. So my dad decided to throw them a curveball. He told them that whatever the rest of the family raised for the bail, he'll not only match it, but he'll offer double what they raised together. Nobody offered 1 cent. Blame averted. Well, I'm certainly going to recycle this if the need ever arises. I hate that though. I've had friends who've been the only ones in their family that had their act together despite all odds. Somehow they end up becoming monetarily responsible for others' consistently poor decision-making skills. This can probably be used in a lot of situations where I'm dealing with would-be deadbeats, totally stealing it. I had a teacher in high school that, using both hands, could write a sentence starting from the beginning and the end simultaneously. He even split the middle word of the sentence. He also spoke around 5 languages. I had one like that. She could write in English and Greek simultaneously. I was playing the card game Egyptian Rat Screw with some friends, and then all of us noticed that one of our friends was slapping a bit too fast to be believed. It turns out he was counting all of our cards and had each of our decks memorized, which is just insane. Maybe it was just my group of friends, but you had to do that to come anywhere near winning. Each game would literally last an hour or 2 and be amazingly fast-paced. 4 of us played every day, and it would literally be our cardio workout for the day. Everyone who would watch us would think we were just randomly slapping a pile of cards. My older brother was always terrible at school. I can remember him straight up asking why he needed to graduate high school and then again in college. He then accepted a low-level job after graduation in marketing that ultimately fell apart due to the company executives screwing up big time. During all of it, he somehow was able to keep a small client, and within 7 months of working, was promoted to their executive marketing director, making 6 figures. Now he has multiple clients on the side and is always scheming something up. The dude is as hard-headed as they come, but nonetheless is a marketing genius. Blows my mind how far he's come. I was once in Chinatown and I saw this old Chinese guy with a bunch of groceries. He tied the bags together by the handle and slung them over his shoulder. He looked ridiculous. The next week, I was struggling with a lot of groceries and I remembered the old Chinese guy, stopped on the sidewalk, tied all my bags together, and walked home like the unencumbered dork I became that day. In high school, I had a friend who we made fun of all the time for being dumb, but he would have the wackiest ideas that would somehow work. One time, around Christmas of my sophomore year, a few of us decided to buy a 30-pack, and then later decided we didn't feel like drinking it that night. I couldn't keep it at my house, but one of my friend's parents was coming to pick all my buddies up. Nobody knew how they were going to get the 30 out of my house and to one of their houses. Then my friend came up with the genius idea. He went upstairs in my house, wrapped the 30 in wrapping paper. He then decided to carry it out right in front of the car with our friend's mom waiting and say it was a gift for his girlfriend who he was going to be seeing later that night. I realized that not being great at school doesn't mean someone isn't a genius. Intelligence comes in many forms. Sure, someone might not be able to do high-level math, but they could fix parts of your car you've never heard of. I knew 2 guys in undergraduate who would play mental chess. As they'd pass in the hall, one guy would say, "Knight to Queen 3" or whatever. The other guy would roll back his eyes for a second and then nod to acknowledge the move. Both guys then kept walking in opposite directions. Later that day when they passed again, the second guy would declare his counter move. The game could last days and they never forgot where any of the pieces were. Each had a mental image of the board. Sure, they might have been faking, but these guys were always first and second on the dean's honor list for all 4 years of my undergraduate. I knew them pretty well. I think the mental chess was legit. Most really good players can do this. Once someone becomes familiar enough with the game, it becomes a lot easier to recognize patterns. Of course, intelligence is advantageous to get good at chess. Did they ever get pissed off and mentally flip the board over? Knight to floor, rook to floor, queen to floor, king to floor. It's all about knowing the game and the related statistics. One of my favorite stories from my college football days is how well some players can recognize patterns and statistics and combine that with their physical prowess. There was a safety on my team that went to the NFL, still playing, who could answer every coverage question or situational scenario with almost 100% accuracy. Anybody who can explain highly complex things very simply. It takes an intelligent person to understand it, but it takes a brilliant person to grasp it so fully they can dumb it down to explain it to anybody. I think it was Feynman who tried to write an introductory textbook on some obscure topic and concluded that more research was needed because he was unable to explain the topic simply enough. I've always found it amazing how most people think they're super smart, but when you ask them to break things down, they're completely unable. In fact, most will then get angry at you or think you're stupid for asking them to break things down. Elevating complexity to simplicity is pure genius. I was at my desk waiting to make a purchase over the phone, and I mentioned to a coworker that I always have to pull my credit card out. I should have this number memorized by now. Another coworker overheard that and said, "I know your Visa number," and spit it right out. After I got off the phone, I asked him, "What was that?" And he said he heard me say it a couple weeks earlier. Numbers just stick with him that way. I already knew he was a bright guy, but that took it up a notch. I'd ask him very politely to not ruin your life. When you sit down in a meeting for work, when you're trying to solve a big problem and someone can say, "That's the wrong question," you need to be asking this. People who can do that generally understand the bigger picture and all the various variables and factors in play and how everything fits together. It's some next level action to watch the entire room go, "Wow, we're looking at trees and that guy's looking at the forest." I accidentally got a promotion literally yesterday for doing something like this. I'm a contract attorney doing doc review and randomly get an email saying they're going to bring in 20% of people for conversations. I immediately crap my pants and I assume I'm in trouble. My initial reaction is, well, if I had more frequent feedback, I could code documents accurately with better consistency. Sort of pack a parachute if they ask why I'm messing up. Turns out the meeting is just a sample of people they wanted to ask about how management was doing, if we had the right tools, if we had too many meetings, if we needed something, blah blah blah. Basically just getting feedback about how the project is going. Since I already had my previous excuse on deck, I sort of just blurted out. The dude seems really interested and takes a bunch of notes. Fast forward to yesterday, I get an email saying they want another meeting. They made me a QC team leader reviewing and managing a group of like 15 people because I apparently have such deep insight into the importance of quality feedback and maintaining consistency. Lazy people are the best at this. I witnessed a kindergartner who couldn't draw straight lines, keep his pencil still, and drag the paper around to draw a triangle. That kid is going to invent the first warp drive. Seriously, don't move the ship, move space. He gets it. My dad had a business trip in Seattle that I tagged along on so I could see a soccer match and explore the city. He invited me to go to the research hospital with him one day and I agreed. They were working on testing some type of cardiovascular tool on a cadaver that they would stimulate blood flow in to test. Seeing my dad, who didn't go to college, barely graduated from high school, lived on welfare with a single mom, and who knocked up a teenage girl when he was a teenager himself, performed surgery on a cadaver using a tool he invented that could potentially save thousands of lives blew my mind. He had hundreds of patents on devices. I got surgery 3 years ago and my shoulder surgeon used a tool he invented in the 90s. He's an incredibly smart and hardworking man who just got the right amount of luck to get him where he is today. I doubt luck played a part. Everything is hard work and luck. So many people who give it their all get nowhere. I've seen it happen with so many bright and talented individuals. It sucks, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. I like it when you meet someone whose English is imperfect, but you realize they're very intelligent and are able to explain their thoughts. I remember once meeting a Japanese archaeologist who wasn't the best English speaker, but when he explained his research to me, it was absolutely fascinating. There was this dude I worked with ages ago who immigrated from China. The higher-ups would get pretty frustrated with him because he was constantly coming up with clever ideas and interesting new ways to do things, but they just wanted to keep the status quo. Some ideas were decent, others were likely brilliant. Anyhow, his spoken English was downright brutal. His written was perfectly fine though. Eventually he left, probably out of frustration. This is why it bugs me so much when people assume that broken English or heavily accented English is an indication that someone is less intelligent. English is hard to learn when it's not your mother tongue, and it's even worse when you're an adult, especially if you're coming from a culture that doesn't even use the same alphabet or similar grammar. Gotta plug my dad in here. Had some friends over, and just to mess around, we asked him the definition of random words in the dictionary. We opened it to the eyes, and I asked the definition of 10 to 12 letter, 3 to 4 syllable words. Not only did he nail all of them, but most definitions were verbatim. When we got to the 10th word, he goes, the verb or the noun, and we lost it. It was seriously ridiculous. We were freshmen in high school and could hardly pronounce the words we picked. Turns out he read the whole dictionary over the summer when he was 16 and bored. Guy is still the smartest person I've ever met. Gonna plug my dad as well. He's been driving big rigs for so long that he has almost memorized the United States interstate highway system. No kidding. You can give him the interstate number and the mile marker and he can usually guess your exact location plus or minus 10 miles. My older brother has really bad ADD and always did terrible in school. I never realized how smart he was until a few years ago. We were watching Jeopardy together and he knew most of the answers to the most obscure questions. I was blown away. I swear it was like the scene from Groundhog Day. That sounds like my cousin. ADHD and ADD, awful in school, and an absolute genius. I used to work with a physician who had patients' medical record numbers memorized. Not because he was trying, he just saw them once and would keep it in his memory. 16 digits. When medical students would ask questions, he would say page number and paragraph where they could find the answer. He wouldn't use progress notes with patients. He would just walk into the room and ask the patient about all their family members by name and their entire medical history without ever glancing at a note. He would write notes 6 weeks after seeing a patient. Never miss a beat. Billing would scream about it constantly. On a side note, he had zero knowledge of the real world or social skills. Memory was the craziest I've ever seen. Years ago, I had a girlfriend in Denmark whom I visited once every few months. A few blocks away from where she lived was a secondhand book and game store run by a friendly old lady. It was basically a normal house, only every wall was covered in bookcases filled with books and movies and video games, ground floor and first floor, and she sat at a desk in the corner with a pile of new old stuff for cataloging. I looked through the neatly alphabetized PS2 games to see if she had any Dynasty Warriors 4, which I hadn't been able to find anywhere else. No luck. I asked her, she thought it over for a second, then said it didn't sound familiar. We bought VidDoc instead and headed home. Flash forward about a year, we stop by again, walk in the door, the lady sees me and says, "Ah, young man, good you're here. I have Dynasty Warriors for you." 4, was it? I'd been told she had a ridiculous memory, but I was just amazed. My girlfriend swears she hadn't been there in months either. I was just another customer and she remembered me and what I was looking for a year. When my dad just decided to add an addition to the house. Like he'd be out there 70 to 80 hours a week, adding 3 extra floors to the house with running water up to the 3rd floor. He would rent excavators and large moving equipment, and only like 3 or 4 times would he hire an extra hand. That was amazing. Lots of dads decide to do that, but it sounds like yours actually completed it, which is absolutely amazing. My dad never did large-scale renovations, but we never had contractors do anything. New carpet? Dad. New roof? Dad. Trees cut down right next to the house? Dad. Back porch? Dad. And none of these were remotely near his actual job. My mother also took apart our very first VCR from the 80s and fiddled around with it for hours until it would work with our archaic TV. Talk about some jerry-rigging. My wife is smart, like 6 languages fluently smart without breaking a sweat. Has never not done well in school, always gets promoted, etc., etc. But no one in my family saw this because she's an introvert and tries to keep herself dumb so people get her and like her. My family and I are smart. She's next level up. So after we got engaged, family had a get together. As in cousins, friends, lots of people. As usual, we played some group games. She was reluctant, but I pulled her aside and asked her to try and fit in. She obliged, but was annoyed with me. Started with Pictionary. She schooled the room. Moved to a bunch of card games with a single deck, counted cards, knew everyone's deck, etc. Quiz board games, knew all the answers. Over and over again, she was dominant to the point of silencing my family. It was unnerving even for me. A few weeks later when we visited her family, "Oh, we don't play games with her. She plays to decimate the competition." "Oh, did you ever consider that you all need to get good?" My ex-wife is like this. No one in my family will play any games with her anymore because she always wins. There was this one time when she was on a winning streak, I decided to float the idea of all 7 of us against just her. She still won every round. Found out my little brother, age 12, has a legit photographic memory. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan and knows an abnormal amount about the series. Whenever he answers questions about it, he looks up and squints a bit. I asked him about it and it turns out that he's actually reading from the book in his head. He can even jump to random page numbers. He also knows a ridiculous amount of world history. I go to him when I need help with that. Sadly, he's adopted and we don't share the same genes. I'd like to be friends with your little brother. I'd take him to parties with me just for the Lord of the Rings trivia so I don't have to pull out the complete guide to Middle-earth. Just kidding. I don't get invited to parties. It would be interesting to find out if his memory is spatial with respect to books. If he had been reading from an ebook reader, whether he would have found it more difficult to remember. From your description of his memory, it sounds like he literally photographs the pages with his mind. Growing up, your dad is always that nut. At least mine was. Always thought of him as a joker who liked to invent stuff around the house. Long story short, when I was around 12, he made a basic hydrogen engine. He was on track to making it practical for his van and was so stoked, claiming he would get up to 4 to 5 more miles to the gallon. He was able to make a small hydrogen cell and a housing for it and set it in his van. It was so complicated, I can't even explain it properly. He got 3 to 4 more miles to the gallon, so his prediction was pretty close. He was then stuck on how to get more out of it, make it cheaper, and, maybe pitch his idea idea to get it on the markets. One day he was Googling new ideas and came across an Aussie uni that basically did the same thing before him. I don't know the details, but it crushed him. He stopped working on it, kinda stopped making stuff. A few years ago, I was home visiting and was walking through his workshop and found the cell tucked away all dusty. It dawned on me then that I will never come close to being as smart and intuitive as my father. I told him before I left too. My old man cried, I cried. It was great. Man, beautiful and sad. I bet it meant a lot to your old man hearing you say that. Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child, what happened? I disowned my father. I don't believe it's nearly as difficult a decision as disowning a child, but it was tough. I grew up in an upper middle class, perfect nuclear family. My parents were high school sweethearts, my dad was an operator at an oil refinery, and my mom was an accountant turned stay-at-home mom. I'm a middle child. I have a 3-year older brother and a 3-year younger brother. When my older brother was about 10, my dad's drinking got out of hand and became extremely physically abusive. A few years later, my mom divorced him after 23 years of marriage because she was afraid for our lives. My dad went off the deep end, started doing drugs, stealing, etc. Was involved in a few hit and runs. My older brother, who had received the brunt of the physical abuse, was manipulated into a relationship with my dad for a few years. To a lesser extent, so was I. He seemed to take an interest in us for the first time since we were little, but in hindsight, it was just more manipulation and gaslighting. We won't go into all the details, but my brothers and I eventually got wind of just what kind of sketchy stuff he was involved in. My little brother and I, who both had aspirations to get into law enforcement, cut him out of our lives completely. My older brother took a while longer. He was a kid who always just wanted his dad to love him, and so he was wearing blinders. He did eventually see the light and cut my dad out as well. A few years ago, my dad was living with his mom. My grandma had been manipulated by him for years, and they had a symbiotic, codependent relationship. She was a prescription addict, and he was an everything addict. My grandma had a reverse mortgage on her home. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and given 6 months to live and moved into a nursing home. My dad kept squatting at her house despite the bank coming to rightfully claim the home. Cops got involved and he was arrested. My grandma slipped and fell 2 days after moving into the nursing home. She developed a brain bleed and died a few days later. My dad had a seizure his first night in jail and was brought to the hospital, where it was determined he had a burst brain aneurysm. The doctors theorized that the aneurysm was a result of his drug use, and when he was scuffing with the cops during the arrest, his increased blood pressure and/or jarring caused it to burst. Now he's in a nursing home and functioning at about a 6-year-old's level. He has some inkling that he's messed up royally and it is all his fault, but he doesn't understand the specifics. He can kind of communicate and holds conversations, but they're bizarre and wander all over, and a lot of very strange words make their way in. I visit him a few times per year. I only do it because the person he became with addiction is dead. I believe that karma caught up to him and he's earned his hell. I truly would not shed a tear if he dropped dead tomorrow. He's been dead to me for a decade. I do have some compassion for a sad, confused 58-year-old man who's in a depressing nursing home and doesn't understand why he has no visitors. He knows he has kids and a wife. He doesn't understand they're divorced. And sometimes he even knows he has grandkids he's never been allowed to meet. So he doesn't understand why nobody visits him. I've started occasional visits not because I have any interest in having a relationship with him, but because unfortunately the doctor saved him when his aneurysm burst, and we're left with a person who's paying for crimes he doesn't know he committed in a world he doesn't understand. He sometimes cries when he asks to see pictures of that little boy, my nephew, his grandson, and I have to explain yet again why he isn't allowed to meet him. He asks me questions about that cop, my little brother, whose name he can't remember. He looks so proud when I tell him that his son is rising through the ranks and just became a canine officer. It's like a shard of the dad he was 25 years ago has surfaced, and everything in between only exists as a convoluted fever dream. It tears my heart open as a human to see his suffering, but in a really twisted, sick way, it gives me satisfaction that his actions caught up to him, which makes me hate myself even more than I already did. I doubt anyone has read this. It wasn't supposed to be a novel, but that's how I disowned my dad, then kind of developed a minimal relationship with the ghost of his former humanity that now occupies his body. My heart goes out to people who have had to disown a child. I was extremely fortunate to have an incredible mom and extended family to support my brothers and me, yet I'm still damaged from my time with him. Having to choose between compassion and love for a flawed person and your own or your other loved one's physical and mental well-being rips something open inside of you and leaves you permanently scarred. I read it, and it moved me deeply. You're an excellent writer, and I encourage you to keep sharing your words. Thank you, and I wish you and your family the best. My mother disowned me and my sister. She was a mentally ill, abusive alcoholic. She tormented us. I bore the brunt of it as I got older in an attempt to shield my sister. I was abused in every way a child can be. Mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually. My boyfriend helped me get out. Well, forced my hand in leaving, and I'm so thankful for that. I'll never forget watching my sister get smaller in my rearview mirror, bawling her eyes out. That was one of the hardest moments of my life. I was leaving her there with my mother. We had tried getting help before, but my mother was a master manipulator. One day, after beating the tar out of me and ripping my hair out, we had gone with my sister's grandmother to the police, and me and my sister were berated and treated like criminals. Told we were ungrateful, spoiled brats. I didn't think calling CPS would help. A year later, my sister's grandmother and father begged me to help my sister. She was suicidal and miserable. They needed me to make some statements and talk to CPS. I was already low contact with my mother, but knew this would have serious consequences. I didn't care. I loved my sister more than anything. It was awful, and we were both disowned by my mother and most of her side of our family. It ended up being the best thing to happen to me. Me and my sister were both diagnosed with CPTSD and are trying to heal. I struggled with alcoholism myself and am almost 2 years sober. I'm happy with my life and where I am, and know that what I've been through has made me so strong. My sister is struggling with substances herself right now, and all I can do is pray and be there for her. I hope she can heal, but she's so very angry right now, which I get because I've been there. I hope she'll snap out of it like I did. I'm not a parent. I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father. Blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby despite him when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her any money because she met a deadbeat child predator and got pregnant again and again and again. She constantly put herself and deadbeat before the kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact sister, and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organized the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled, clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towels stained gray from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home. There are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because Deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that Deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him and he kicks her out of their crap hole trailer. Deadbeat said, "I would rather be homeless than live with you." Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Edit. I never really finished my point with the story. My parents had disowned my oldest sister when she moved to North Carolina with Deadbeat for 6 years until my niece reached out to me through Facebook. I had never even met my 2 youngest nieces until this event. I regret turning my back on my sister. I really hate her and what she's put her babies through, but if we stayed in her life for those 6 years, we maybe could have prevented this. I took custody of a 4 and a 2-year-old the week my son was born because my sister's a heroin junkie. Much respect to you and your family. My siblings and I have stopped interacting with my oldest brother. We found out that years earlier he had molested at least 2 boys. He was an adult at the time. He showed no remorse and turned the story around to say that those boys were at fault. It was so disgusting to watch someone you grew up with treat people so poorly and show such a blatant disregard for others. The good news is that the remaining 4 siblings have become closer, and we are now able to appreciate the good we see in each other. It's true when they say if you could pick your family, it would look much different than it is. My parents disowned my oldest sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc. But my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings and I. Still, they co-signed for her house so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try to work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house and got some leniency, but to no avail because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she paid $12,000 for IFE and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons when my parents took them to Disney World. He didn't, and said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking since it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work in my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. My heart actually aches for your mom. I hope she got more than just disownment. My mother and her sister were both adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill and we were told to prepare to say goodbye. So the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this tough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, the aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would get from their estate when she passes. She didn't press any formal charges because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on too. It seems extra appalling when it happens during a difficult time for the family, but it seems also like these kinds of people wait to strike in these high-stress situations. While most of the family were burying my husband's grandmother, his cousin broke into her house and stole her checkbook. Meanwhile, on my side of the family, my cousin ransacked her mother's jewelry and tried to break into a safe in the house while said aunt was in the hospital on her deathbed. Honestly, how do these people live with themselves? I love my son, but he abused me. When he turned that violence onto his sister by choking her, I had to say goodbye. Me too. I caught him when he lunged for her, routinely attacked us. He went to his mom's where he attacked his new stepfather until the stepdad left. My son and I don't speak. You did the right thing. I wish my parents had been as brave as you. Thank you for protecting your daughter. My ex-wife disowned my son. We both married young when I was in the military, high school sweethearts. She became pregnant 6 months into our marriage. I don't think she connected with him at all after he was born. The most she did with him was Instagram photo shoots where she painted herself as #1 mommy. When he turned 3, I left the military. A year after that, she ran for the hills. I remember it like it was yesterday. I sat down with her at a local restaurant to talk divorce plans. We split all of our financials and material items down the middle. We finally got to custody for my kiddo, something I dreaded to discuss because fathers never gain custody in my area, and she tells me, I want absolutely no responsibility. I was taken aback, and I asked if she was sure. She was. That one sentence hurt me more than anything else that had happened during that time. My biological father wanted nothing to do with me, and now I was seeing it happen with my own child, but with his mother. I received full custody and she married within a year afterwards. She had another child too. Her parents tried their best to be a part of his life, but she still does her best to avoid him. He's 7 now and used to it, but I know it weighs heavily on him. It just really sucks, but it's life, I guess. It's better she isn't there if she never wanted to be. He may not know that now, but he'll probably figure it out as he grows up. That's vile. Your son is lucky to have you. I'm sorry that you both have to live with this. I was raised by a single mom. It definitely messes you up a little bit at first, but you grow up and life goes on. I was bitter towards my dad, to say the least. Wondered why I wasn't ever good enough, but then you reach a point when you realize they weren't good enough for you. If she was in his life, it would probably be more damaging to him. My mom was a super mom and brought peace into my life. Gave me all the love in the world. You're the super dad and he's better off just having you. I'm 38 years old. Trust me, one super parent is enough in life. Not my kid, but my sister I raised for several years. I was a senior in high school when my parents had my sister. Completely unexpected. They were 58 and 55. I never really got to know her much as I went away to college when she was 5 months old and was in the Air Force by the time she was 1.5. I saw her twice on leave and got pics, but the way life was working out, we never really got time together. Fast forward, Our dad dies when she's 2, and my stepmother's raising her. She was a terrible parent, like the kind that saw one of her kids run away at 16 to halfway across the country, another run away at 15 and get married, and one that is just a loon who spent his life bouncing around whatever hot MLM program was out there as a career. She also convinced my dad to send me to a Pray Away the Gay camp in Tennessee when I was 15. So when my sister was 11 and begging for help, I took leave and went to her. Surprisingly, my stepmonster was happy to get attorneys to drop the paperwork for me to become my sister's guardian and even pay for it. So I'm raising my sister and things are okay until she's about 14. Then I caught her doing these videos online talking dirty to get guys to jerk off. So that was a mess of trying to get those down and suing the people that hired her to do them. Ran away for a week, hiding out at a friend's house. Found her when she was caught shoplifting. A B&E charge at 14, trying to steal the phone of a boy she was dating to see if he was talking to other girls. It happened on base and I managed to talk it out of being a bigger thing. A second B&E charge with friends breaking into the NCO club to try to steal beer. I was told I had to leave base housing at that point. My security clearance was suspended to make sure she wasn't putting me in a position I could be compromised. Still 14. Arrested with stolen military ID trying to get into a bar. 15. Escapes rehab. 15, escapes rehab again. 16, things seem good and she's taking school seriously. At 18, she was accepted to RISD, graduated with honors, and had an actual decent paying job with a web company with benefits and everything. Started getting stoned a lot and lost her job, sold her car to pay bills, lost her apartment, still hadn't bothered looking for work, got her trust fund at 24, blew over $400K in 2 years with nothing to show for it, had multiple cases against her for drugs, was restricted to the state but decided to go follow fish around anyway and sell Molly, got picked up for hooking and possession out of state, was returned to Rhode Island where she was detained and somehow released pending trial yet again. While awaiting trial, she was caught holding enough package for sale heroin to qualify as a distribution charge. By then, I hadn't heard from her for almost 7 years, and only managed to keep up with her reading the police blotter or from the occasional attorney that she had contact me to verify that I would pick up her legal tab. I wouldn't. Against any logic, she was out of prison in under 3 years. I heard she dimed a bunch of people out to make it happen. She showed up at my house asking for a place to stay. I said I couldn't have her in my house, but I'd get her a place for the night and then help her locate a place of her own. That night, she broke into my house, nearly got shot by me while doing it, and tried to spin some story that she was looking for something she dropped in my house earlier that day, despite never actually entering my house. I told her she had to go. She threatened she would call DCFS and tell them I was abusing my kids if I didn't go with her to an ATM and give her all the money I could withdraw. I told her to GTFO before I exercised the Castle Defense Law and dropped her. Took out a restraining order the next day, and in doing so, found out she once again left state when she wasn't supposed to have and violated her parole. So back to the clink. Since then, she's been dead to me. Wow. Just wow. That was a roller coaster of emotions. ER doctors and nurses, have any of your patients surprised you with their amount or lack of pain tolerance? I had a patient with an open tib fib, the bones in the lower leg sticking out, and below that looks like jelly, trying to walk, apparently unaware of how bad his leg was. Of course, he was incredibly drunk at the time. This happened to a guy in my judo class. Spiral fracture on both bones. I didn't see it, but they described it like this. Both of the people were white belts and inexperienced. One attempted osotogari, but instead of stepping past to offset balance and then sweeping his opponent's leg out, he stepped alongside to offset balance and stomped on the leg that all the other guy's weight was on. There was a snap and he went down. He waited 10 seconds or so and said, "I think my leg is broken." Then he briefly tried moving and instead said, "Yep, it's broken." Then he just sat there talking to us calmly while occasionally looking at his ankle. The EMTs were surprised at how calm he was too. Working in a hospital has taught me the downside of abusing painkillers/drugs. Patients constantly come in here with long-term substance abuse issues, and now that they are actually hurt, MVC, broken bones, etc., you can give them enough drugs to put down a horse, and they still feel everything. This is one of my biggest fears. I had major back surgery when I was 14, so I pretty much live with constant pain. I will do everything I can to avoid taking a Vicodin so that when I get older and I really start to hurt, I haven't built up a tolerance. The only thing that sucks about it is that the pills expire before I use them all, and so when I really do need them, getting a new doctor to prescribe them is really hard. They always try to treat me like a junkie trying to score, and while it is understandable, it really pisses me off. My husband is a recovering addict. Started out abusing pain medication after back surgery and moved on to heroin later. And we found this to be true. He's 5 years clean. Last year, we had a grease fire in our house and he ended up getting second and third degree burns over 50% of his arms. At the ER and the trip to the burn center, he kept trying to not let them give him opiate pain medications for obvious reasons. When he finally let them give him something, it was 4 times the normal dose because of his tolerance to the pain medication. Even then, it only helped him for about 10 minutes before the pain was back. It's been a long recovery from his burn. He ended up having a skin graft done over the worst part of the burn on his left hand. And the pain management part has been the hardest part for both of us. He's still on pain medication for the aching in the graft site, but he has come so far. I was a tech in the ER when the EMTs brought in an elderly woman with what they said was a sprained ankle. She had slipped while mopping a floor at work and her coworker had called it in. Turned out she had broken both of the bones in the lower part of her leg, but was sweetly chatting with us. I was impressed as soon as I saw the x-rays. EMTs had no idea and had splinted her ankle over where the bones were broken. Typically, broken bones in the legs, unless there's a huge amount of angulation or displacement, do not cause a ton of pain unless moved. We see that often in the old people with hip fractures as well. They're usually sitting there still and having no pain, but the second you try to move it, they're in excruciating pain. Same goes with trying to bear weight. I broke a bone in my foot and didn't go to the doctor until a month after. The sprain wasn't healing. The bone set improperly on its own and it causes me pain. My parents were too cheap to pay for the surgery and I can't afford it now. ER doc here. 50-year-old guy with a massive heart attack just lying there chilling. Ask him his pain level, deadpan, just a little. 5-year-old boy with both forearm bones fractured and dislocated, playing on iPad with the other arm. 60-year-old lady slips, falls, and destroys pelvic bone. Just wants one Tylenol and scooches out of bed wanting to walk home. After much convincing, she begrudgingly accepted that might not be a great idea. There are some pretty tough people out there. Why are heart attacks always described as massive? I never heard of any other severity. Always massive. Doesn't anybody ever get a regular-sized heart attack? Fire/medic here. Farmers seem to be tough. One time, a guy pulled up into the front ramp, got out of his truck, and walked up holding his severed forearm in his other arm. Get him in the truck, take off. Along the way, he states he lived down the road and wanted to get to us quickly. When asked why he didn't call 911, he replied, "I just cut my arm, I ain't dying." Also had a Battle of the Bulge vet tell me he didn't need a blanket. It was -7 with wind chill. My grandma grew up on a farm in Alberta and was unbelievably tough. She once broke her finger by slamming it in a car door and splinted it herself with popsicle sticks and duct tape. Later, her appendix burst, but we didn't find out until they took her to the hospital because she passed out at dinner in the retirement home. She said she hadn't wanted to bother anyone by making a fuss. Finally, she was diagnosed with stomach cancer. It spread through her entire digestive system. After she went into hospice, my mom was cleaning out grandma's apartment and found every single prescription bottle of painkillers mom had picked up at the pharmacy for her, unopened in a drawer. Knowing mom would eventually find them, my grandma had written a note saying she preferred to keep her mind clear. She was seriously tough. Yep, my old man is a lifelong farmer. A couple years back, he was chasing some escaped calves and while climbing over a fence managed to break his ankle, which wouldn't have been so bad if he hadn't kept chasing the calves. Rounding them up, got them into the holding pen, and then asked if I would be kind enough to drive him to the ER. Last year, he also nearly severed the tip of his thumb, was mooring his boat and it pitched unexpectedly and the rope got caught. He just superglued it back together. Farmers are tough. For example, a guy near me wrapped around a PTO during the winter a few years ago. He walked away and didn't go to the doctor the next day. He had breaks in both his legs and broken ribs and a massive concussion. My grandpa, who's an 80-ish-year-old rancher, got bucked off a horse. He stood up and it didn't look good. He limped away and said, "Get me a dip." My grandma handed him his chew can and drove him to the hospital. He ended up having a broken leg, 6 broken ribs, a broken arm, and a broken wrist. He's broken each arm and leg multiple times and broken every rib multiple times. Another farmer I knew got his arm ripped off in a baler when he was reaching in to clear it out. This was before cell phones and he was stuck. When night fell and he wasn't home, his dad went out 3 or 4 hours later. The first thing he said was, "Get me a beer and a cigarette, we're going for a drive." Even though he lost a ton of blood, he lived. Farmers, especially old ones, are so used to pain I guess they don't perceive it anymore. I know I'm nowhere near as tough as those guys. Not ER, but actually a cashier at a fast food place. A woman ordered 2 meals, and since she was a little older, really old actually, I offered to bring her food to the table so she wouldn't have to wait. I get there and her husband had wads of paper towels stuck all over his arms with electrical tape, and his right hand and part of his face were a mix of blood and second-degree burns. Turned out he was working on his lawnmower and the engine blew up on him. They stopped for lunch on the way to the hospital for the burns and the metal they couldn't get out. He was acting like it was nothing. My grandfather got his finger caught in a lawnmower engine somehow. Went a couple weeks before finally asking my mom if he should get it looked at. Mom said it was green, so of course she said yes. Ended up having to be partially amputated. Whoops. Working as an EMT, I got called to a 64-year-old female slipped in her house, possible sprained ankle. When we got there, the woman is sitting in a chair with her legs stretched out in front of her, but she had long pants and slippers on that covered the entire ankle, so I couldn't really see. When we walked in, she started talking and didn't really seem to be in any pain at all, so I figured this was going to be an easy trip. I kneeled down in front of her to take a closer look, and I wasn't surprised to find that it wasn't just broken, it was messed right up. I mean, the foot was at a 90-degree angle to the outside, and it was also leaned down, so what should have been the side of her foot was facing straight down, and the bone that should have been holding the ankle in place was pushing against the skin on the inside of her ankle so hard that it was about to rip through. I was bewildered at the fact that at that moment she said, "It doesn't hurt, so I hope it isn't broken." She hardly made a peep on the ride to the hospital. 35 miles, very bumpy. Come to find out she had multiple sclerosis, and that made people feel pain differently. That's amazing how she was so unfazed, but I'm very curious now. How does multiple sclerosis make people feel pain differently? Most neurons are coated in something called a myelin sheath. It helps signals move faster. MS strips the neurons of this myelin sheath, causing the signals to move slower. Therefore, any normal body responses would be delayed by a lot. It's especially bad when it happens in the brain, as they cannot repair themselves. That's pretty much what MS is. It's pretty much the body attacking itself, and that's why it's so difficult to treat. That reminds me of my, at the time, 95-year-old great aunt. She fell one night and cracked her head open on her coffee table. She called my house for my dad, asking if he could stop by when he had a chance. We lived right across the street, so my dad ran over to check on her and walked in to see her covered in blood. He called an ambulance, and apparently she was pissed at him and didn't talk to him for a while because he had made such a big deal about it. She apparently had the EMTs cracking up because of how pissed off she was about the blood getting on her new carpet. I was chatting with my physiotherapist one day about pain tolerance, and she said that she once had a maybe ex-cocaine addict as a patient whose tolerance was absolute zero. She couldn't even touch him without him perceiving it as painful, let alone stretch or manipulate his body. She said he was a very challenging case. That sounds extremely tough for the doctor especially. Was that because of the guy's addiction? Cocaine won't do that, but opiates like heroin can cause this. It's called hyperalgesia. Radiographer here. As a student, I met a patient who was a typical little old lady. She came in with far too many shopping bags and walked extremely slowly. She'd been sent by her GP because she'd fallen getting out of the bath a few weeks previous. So we brought her in and took the first image, AP pelvis if you were wondering, and her pelvis was absolutely ruined. Turns out she had slipped and fallen with one leg in and one leg out of the bath and had taken the whole fall on her vagina. Not wanting to cause a fuss, this woman had ignored the pain and carried on her life as normal for weeks, long enough for the fractures to be fairly healed, albeit in a strange way not really resembling a pelvis much more. Old people don't want to inconvenience others. My grandma would have been the exact same. My grandparents came for a visit when I was a kid, 2-hour drive, and my parents find out that my grandma couldn't walk from the car to the house. It turns out that her legs had become paralyzed from sepsis. She was so angry with my parents for calling an ambulance and making a big deal out of it. When I was studying nursing, I saw a man who had broken his knee in a motorcycle accident 3 days before. The knee was at least 3 times its normal size. The doctor asked him about the pain, and he told him it wasn't that bad. He was mostly annoyed at his family who had taken him to the emergency room. My husband dropped a dirt bike on his leg when he was a teenager. The exhaust landed on him. He has a circle on his leg the size of a baseball from it where no hair grows. When it happened, he tried to hide it. He ended up not being able to walk, and he started to smell from infection before his mom noticed and made him go to the ER. Sometimes people are dumb. He's lucky he didn't lose his foot. I'm an oncology nurse. My patients have some of the highest pain tolerances I've ever seen. They literally have tumors taking over entire cavities in their bodies. Huge masses pressing on places that aren't supposed to be pressed on, and literally eroding through their skin, and they will ask me for pain meds when I have a second. It amazes me. Not a doctor, but my goddaughter was born very prematurely, requiring a major open heart surgery at 2 weeks old. We were told by her docs that since she'd gone through so much surgical trauma the first few weeks of her life, as a neonate, her pain receptors and nerve endings would not develop normally. They gave us the example that if she put her hand on a hot stove as a kid, she would have sustained a severe burn before feeling any pain whatsoever. She never cried as a kid when she got shots, fell down, banged into things, even when it was enough to draw blood. I suspect her medical history was the cause. There's a great documentary out there about kids with a genetic disorder who can't feel pain. It might have been on Discovery or something. The first sign for many are when they chew off their own lips or bite off their own finger. What a crazy disease. I had much the same thing happen when I was a kid. I was born full term, but with a birth defect that required multiple surgeries and left me with severe nerve damage. My parents had to watch me pretty much full time until I was 3 or so, because I'd get injured and wouldn't really know it, or just wouldn't care. 5-year-old child with a severed finger, half hanging off, cool as a cucumber, and not even upset. Mom was in hysterics. I have a similar story involving a 21-year-old female. Severed her index finger in a door and I was the first responder. I controlled the bleeding until we could get her to the hospital, but she took it like a champ. I didn't hear a single peep out of her mouth. My grandma used to be a nurse. She said whenever a kid came in, they'd be hysterical or calm. The parent was always the opposite, like you described. My dad has an unusually high pain tolerance. He was cleaning a fishing pole in our backyard once, and he didn't notice that the pole had splintered and pulled his hand down on it. The force caused the pole to snap in half and drove itself all the way through his hand. He stood up, walked in the kitchen with pole hanging out of his hand, and calmly asked my mom if he should just pull it out or go to the ER. Since it was a fiberglass one, he opted for the ER, just in case something was broken off inside his hand. The list goes on and gets worse. The other was when he fell off a ladder and shattered his leg. The bone came through the skin and he was complaining about going to the ER. My mom used to have a habit of falling off of 6-foot ladders. She would be painting or something during the day when no one's home. If we came home and find her lying on the couch, we knew that she had fallen and cracked her ribs. She had lung surgery twice before and commented that the rib spreader hurt more than broken ribs. She had the highest pain tolerance of anyone I ever knew. That and she hated sitting still. Sounds almost exactly like my dad. He nailed his hand to a wall during construction with a nail gun, pulled the hand away from the wall, pulled the nail out, and drove himself to the hospital. Also drove himself to the hospital after collapsing from his first heart attack. Not a very smart guy. ER doctor here. I can't count on 2 hands the number of patients I've seen that are covered in tattoos and are scared of needles or IVs. I mean, complete phobia. It makes absolutely no sense. If anyone can enlighten me as to how this phenomenon can exist, I'd appreciate it. Edit? Thanks, guys. Seems like it's the appearance, depth, and the associated pain when things don't go correctly that create the aversion. To quote a friend of a friend when asked by an ER doctor who queried why he was freaking out over getting a tetanus shot after having a cut sewn up without anesthetic, that's why it's called an irrational fear of needles. I can only speak from personal experience. With tattoos, the needles are penetrating into the dermis. IVs and shots are going into the vein and muscle respectively. For me, it's the thought that the shots are much deeper. ER doctor here. My intern year in residency, I saw a 17-year-old kid who, while playing hockey, tried to stop a puck with a gloved hand. It struck his fingertip, injuring the base of his nail, causing a significant deformity. His nail bed needed repair, which requires first removing the nail. That's done by bluntly dissecting or separating the nail from the tissue below it. If your stomach didn't turn reading that and imagining it, congratulations, you have no soul. Typically, we use a numbing agent to eliminate sensation to the entire finger using something called a digital block. I put it in. After 10 minutes, he still felt me touching his fingertip. I tried putting some around the nail. He still felt everything. His mother said his father actually had a similar thing. Lidocaine didn't work on him. I offered him a different numbing medicine. We can inject Benadryl in that case, or even knocking him out. He looked at me in the eyes and said, "Doc, just take it off." Without anything? Yeah, it's fine. They fix our cuts without numbing medicine. But it's gonna hurt a lot. I have to scrape, I know. So I went at it. He grabbed a towel with his other hand and I went to work. 45 minutes later, the nail was off, he was repaired, and I replaced the nail in its rightful place. The kid didn't even make a noise. Hockey players are tough. I have the same issue. The lidocaine family of anesthetics does nothing to numb pain for me. Neither do any of the others I've had used on me. This makes procedures like that nail thing a bit pesky. Dentistry also falls into the same category. The worst thing I went through was my vasectomy. The doctor did his usual injection of anesthetic and I did my usual, yep, it's numb response, since they won't do anything without jabbing you with needles. Nothing was numb, but we went through with it anyway, just like every other time I had to have something done. It was worse than getting stitched up, but not as bad as a root canal. I've had a dislocated shoulder reduced, a separated shoulder reduced, broken ribs realigned, several lacerations stitched up, a thumbnail repair, and other stuff done without being numbed up. I usually do the towel trick like the kid. What's the juiciest rumor at your school that turned out to be 100% true? New kid comes to high school. He has a funny accent because his parents were missionaries traveling all over the world. He was actually kind of cool. Spoke at least 4 different languages, English, Spanish, Russian, and Mandarin. He was super polite and everyone liked him. Of course he had haters, mainly the so-called bullies, a concept he never understood. Rumors started that he was well versed in many forms of martial arts. He never denied or admitted to them. One of the bullies decided to find out. He was much bigger than the new kid, and new kid did everything in his power to not escalate the fight. Even took a punch from said bully. Well, guess the rumor was true. Not only did the new kid beat him up, but the bully pooped himself. Most awesome thing I ever saw in high school. Edit. Unfortunately, I was never really close to him, but I had heard from another friend of mine that he ended up moving after high school. Nobody seems to know anything else. I barely remember his first name. It was not an easy one, let alone his last name. So he will live on in memory as that one foreign kid that nobody messed with. Not only did the kid beat him up, but the bully pooped himself. Thank you. This has made it onto my list of favorite things to look at when I'm old. Resource officer was a child molester and then murdered his wife after he was fired. He fled and they still haven't found him over 10 years later. He's on Marshall's top 15 most wanted list. His name was Dan Heers and his mother thinks he's dead. The computer tech teacher got caught having sex with a student. He was put on suspension while the investigation was conducted, and he killed himself by running his car into a tree. The science teacher was a pedophile. Some kid found Viagra in his desk, and he was put in admin leave when they found a used condom in his trash after the search. Then kids came forward. Was not pretty. Science teacher at my boarding school was also a pedophile. He was caught when he was projecting his computer screen in class and child porn popped up. He was obviously fired, but his wife and adopted son stayed. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for them. I'm 90% sure my former science teacher was also a bit of a pedophile too. He would get uncomfortably close to girls and try and look down their tops. It was only after I left that school that I heard he got expelled for inappropriate behavior. Later I heard he had moved to some Asian country to teach there. Who knows what he's up to over there? 2 teachers that were married to each other were sleeping with students. The husband was the first to do it and the wife found out and slept with some of her students as revenge. Also, the resource officer was sleeping with some of the 18-year-old seniors. All got confirmed when they were fired for it. Well, the teachers got fired. The officer got moved to bicycle patrol. My school had a similar incident. Wife was fired for sleeping with a student. They got divorced and then the husband was fired a few years later for the same thing. The students were 18, so no one went to jail. Ah, yes. Find out your husband's cheating on you? Don't divorce him. Nah. Start cheating too, with people that will get you fired and possibly jailed. This one girl would make those colorful friendship bracelets made out of needlepoint floss for every guy she gave a BJ to. There were lots of bracelets. Is that so she keeps track of repeats? Rumor had it that a teacher was having sex with some of his students that wanted higher grades. No one believed it to be true because he was married and just had his 3rd baby. 100% true, and all the students were proud of it. He's still in jail 5 years later. This is one thing I've never understood about the American education system. Why do you have your teachers set your exams and give you your grades? Surely it defeats the point of having an examination in the first place and risks students/teachers blackmailing each other as seen here. An abortion using a coat hanger where a student bled to death. It happened years before I attended the school and was the basis of the ghost sightings near the bathroom. Man, this is disturbing as hell. That there's an underground bunker from the Cold War era below the school. Not only is it there, but it turns out you can access it from the PE changing room through a secret trap door. Edit, it's in Krakow, Poland because so many of you were curious. But looks like there's actually lots of schools that have one. Edit 2. Also, it is confirmed to be a bunker, but it was built before the school existed and was most likely emptied by previous owners of the building. My school had one of those as well. The hatch was hidden in the cafeteria kitchen. Its existence was confirmed when our recent American history teacher went down and took pictures for our Cold War unit. He said that most of the tunnel had been filled in with concrete, but there was still substantial walking area. My school had one of these. Though it wasn't hidden under a trap door, there was a door to it in the theater. The door led down to the pit under the stage, and the back of that led to the area that could serve as a bunker. The bunker actually led to a system of tunnels that then connected it to the middle school that was about 3/4 of a mile away. Reminds me of my high school. It used to have a coal-burning boiler, and there was a massive coal room that extended out underneath the marching band's practice fields. Some stoners I knew would sneak in there to get high, and they bumped into the art teacher in there. The art teacher had the same idea. Why is it always the art teachers? In middle school, a rumor floated around pretty much most of the school that the principal had a consistent record of sexual assault. And what do you know, he got arrested for sexual assault when I was a freshman in high school. It was all over the news and everything. The government/politics teacher at my school quietly retired because it was sort of an open secret that the girls could get a better grade in his class by wearing low-cut shirts. I don't know if he ever did anything though. A younger male teacher, upper 20s, newlywed, was having sex in his classroom during lunch with an older female teacher, married in her mid-40s. A student caught them and filmed it and pretty much blackmailed them into turning themselves in. Well, at least he was sleeping with a teacher and not a student. Well, that's a plot twist I could get behind. A student used blackmail to get the offenders to do the right thing for once. At one of the schools in my country, someone caught the principal and some other teacher having sex. They dragged him all over social media and they ended up ruining his life. The guy killed himself. We had a Spanish teacher who would keep giving random financial/business advice during classes. One day, he tabbed over to his stock trading homepage and accidentally revealed that he was a millionaire. Rumors about his past started circulating. Around graduation, some students found old newspaper articles confirming that he was a former meth dealer who had spent time in jail. Was a seriously cool guy, actually. That would be a good Breaking Bad spinoff. We had a physics teacher who was rumored to be a millionaire as well. It was said that he had a hand in the development of MRI machines in his younger years. I know he himself had stories about working in the lab of an MRI factory, so I'm pretty sure it checks out, even if he never said how much money he had. Either way, the rumors were that he had enough to retire anytime he wanted, so it was probably a lot. How the heck did a former meth dealer get teacher certification? I don't know if I buy this one. If he hadn't been caught, it would make sense, and maybe he gets a job if he has a drug possession prior. But having distribution on your record and then getting a post-prison teaching gig doesn't add up. Two sports teachers were having an affair with each other, even though one of their spouses was already a sports teacher in the same school using the same dinky office. Rumor was confirmed when the two dudes had a fist fight in the basketball court. I feel like every PE teacher I ever had was plowing another member of staff. Edit, I should mention I was homeschooled. That the school district security guard would let you get away with anything if you gave him some coke. He later got caught and fired for it. If anyone else went there, it was at Desert View High School in Tuscan. Edit, I was talking about cocaine, not the soda, for those who didn't realize that. And on a serious note, it's all about the Dr. Pepper. The wood tech teacher was married to the French teacher and they had a child. The PE teacher slept with the French teacher, and the wood tech teacher went into the PE department and threatened to beat the crap out of the PE teacher with a cricket bat. I believe this was during a normal school day, but it was before my year started there. A second PE teacher got involved and stopped it, so everyone kept their jobs. Later on, the wood tech teacher married the geography teacher and they had 2 kids, whilst a third PE teacher cheated on her husband with the second PE teacher, and every Wednesday, an hour before lunch, I would see PE teachers 2 and 3 through the window of my science classroom. They would get in a car and leave together. Sometimes I would see them come back, and sometimes I wouldn't. I jokingly pointed it out to people before anyone else caught on, and later they became a couple that was known to students. Final count, 6 teachers, 3 pregnancies, 2 affairs, and 1 angry husband with a cricket bat. Teacher from my high school. Girls were creeped out by him and constantly reported him for making them uncomfortable. He was quite obese, belly hung to his knees, so the school and other students wrongly assumed these girls were being rude. 6 years later, he's in prison after being caught with child porn on his computer, alongside upskirt photos of girls from my school. My science teacher got caught with child porn on his computer too. Genuinely though, pedophile teachers are probably more common than we think. Oh God, this is why people need to believe teenagers when they report any sort of sexual misconduct. Something similar happened at my high school in South Texas. Pretty much the same story, but the teacher was an older man. I never had him, but some friends of mine always said he made them feel uncomfortable. Was outed as a pedophile a few years later after finding child porn on his personal computer. That there was a girl in the boys' bathroom giving BJs for $10. There really was, and she got expelled. $10? That's way too cheap considering the risk. Girl in my class did this only for free. Came back to class after lunch bragging about how there was a literal line of guys and she'd blown 12. A girl blew the whole basketball team after a game. Don't know the exact details, I just know the girl left and 3 kids got expelled. I'm not naming the high school for privacy reasons. The reason they got expelled was because it was a Catholic school and they did it in the locker room. My 6th grade math teacher was super creepy. He would assign seats randomly, but always place the girls in the front of the classroom. Did the whole lingering stare thing and was always trying to get people to hang out with him during lunch. I never did, but he was married and has a baby, so no one really suspected anything of him other than being creepy. Fast forward about 7 years, the teacher ended up being a sex offender. He had an ongoing relationship with a girl that began when she was 13. Based on what I could see from the various news articles, she was either in my year or the year before me. The police came to arrest him in the middle of his class, cuffed him in front of his students, and then had to walk him throughout campus in cuffs to get to their car. I don't feel bad for him at all, but I can't imagine how his wife and son must feel. The same exact thing happened at my school, except he was an art teacher. What is wrong with the world? Probably not the juiciest thing, but the one I remember because of how I found out. A few of our high school library walls were weird, sort of a lowercase b shape. So there was this empty space behind the bookshelves up against the walls. Tunnels, basically. Word was students were messing around in there. I worked in the library, had to move the shelves, clean the tunnels, found used condoms. It was an all-boys school at the time, if that matters. Mind, the condoms weren't the worst thing really. The leftover food debris in there was worse. Stuff like chicken bones. Edit. A couple years later, I was talking with an ex-schoolmate. Another guy from our graduating class comes in. I hate that guy, my friend says. He's gay. Dude, you're gay. There's gay, and then there's so gay other gay people think you're too gay. Turns out that gent had been one of the entrepreneurial fellows selling services for a few dollars ago. I wasn't shocked since I already had some idea, but I was surprised that the going rate had been so cheap. You know you've hit rock bottom when you'll give a blowy for a piece of fried chicken. Either that or that's some awfully good chicken. There was a rumor that our female English teacher was sleeping with the starting QB and that her youngest child was not her husband's but the QB's. She was caught sleeping with a different one of her students years later, and it is now known that she has slept with a number of former students, including the QB. Now people really think her youngest kid isn't her husband's. When I was in middle school, the big joke rumor was that 2 teachers were banging. Years later, everyone finds out that not only were they having an affair outside of their respective marriages, but that the male teacher was cheating on both women with a man. The female teacher moved away and ended her own life. The entire situation was unbelievably messy. I'm always amazed at people who have the energy and time to cheat. Like, how did he stay organized enough to fit in a wife, a mistress, and a gay lover while working full-time? It just sounds exhausting. The physics teacher was sexting and sleeping with one of his students. Not sure if she was 18 or not at the time. Although, honestly, no one was surprised. He was a little too friendly toward the girls and changed his pants in the back of the classroom once. He ended up leaving for personal reasons over Thanksgiving break, but of course it got out. Sadly, his wife was in her 3rd trimester, which probably didn't make it any easier for her to find out her husband was sleeping with a high school student. I feel as if a disproportionate number of the sex-offending teacher stories involve a pregnant wife or just-born child. That within the first 2 weeks of school starting and everyone meeting each other, one of the girls had a threesome with 2 guys who didn't really get along. So she convinced them to make love, not war. We had a study hall teacher who was a huge hard ass with a handlebar mustache who was retired Navy. Turned out he was a hardcore gay/BDSM porn star in the early 2000s. He got fired even though it was long before his time teaching. I ended up writing a letter to the administration, county, and their attorneys, but he stayed fired. I guess it would be hard to command respect from students when Googling his porn name immediately brought up a pic of his balls bound in leather. Our math teacher in high school had a student teacher she was helping train to take over for her when she went on maternity leave. The student teacher was maybe 20 or 21 and a fairly attractive young woman, so naturally all the guys in the class had a crush on her. One guy in particular was a super senior, around 18 and 19. He flirted with her non-stop and she would act super embarrassed and blush and in a non-committal way tell him to knock it off. I'm sure you see where this is going. Well, towards the end of the semester, he bragged about going out on a date with her and how they went to the movies, then he went back to her place and they had sex. We all thought he was full of it, but the rumor got around the school and of course the teachers and faculty found out. Then one day she's just gone, and we had substitute teachers for the rest of the semester. We all knew what happened. Looking back, it's kind of a shame that she probably wrecked her future teaching career because of him. Yeah, teachers shouldn't start that young with people they were allowed to bang a few weeks ago. A girl got caught giving her boyfriend a blowjob in one of the stairwells of my school. The government teacher, one of the most ultra-religious and pure-hearted individuals on earth, was the one who caught them. Ended up in a science class with the girl. She did not care at all that she got caught and took her legend status like a champ. Still makes me laugh over a decade later. Similar thing happened at my school, but the guy got put on the sex offenders list even though they were both 14 and the girl initiated it. She wasn't punished. Georgia schools suck. There was this couple I knew in high school who did stuff like this. Our school was small and we just had tables, mesh tables, important, out on a black top that served as an all-purpose courtyard and lunch area. Since the girl wore skirts, he would often finger her under the table during lunch. Teacher walked by and somehow didn't notice. She even blew him a few times in full view of everyone, thinking she was being slick. Also, there was this time I had to deliver something to the chem room and this girl, different girl, was giving a hand job to 2 guys at once during class. Their seat was in the back, but in line of sight of the teacher's desk. Don't know how they never got caught. Very attractive, married with kids PE teacher was screwing very attractive, married with kid English teacher. We all thought they were just very flirty people, but nope, full-on affair going on. I call bull. I've never seen a remotely attractive PE teacher. The music teacher in my high school was rumored to have been fired for sending explicit photos to a female student. There had been subs taking his place for nearly a month. The principal said he was too ill to come into work, and eventually another rumor that he had cancer started spreading around. He had been bald longer than anyone could remember. If you asked any of the school's staff what was going on, they would just say, "He's just sick right now, we don't know when he'll be returning." One day in my physics class, everyone in the class pestered the teacher for the whole period until he finally gave in. Some people were still trying to argue the cancer story. One student asked the physics teacher, "Did he send nudes to that girl?" And he finally said, "The thing that you think happened, it happened." The student said, "So he did?" And the teacher simply nodded his head yes. A month or so later, the music teacher showed up in school. Everyone was running up to him in the hallway asking what happened. He dodged every question, and the last thing I heard him say was, "I'm just here to get some things." He didn't teach his class that day, and I never saw him again.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.